guitar thing.
No.
This is. Oh, I just want to see what.
Now it's recording. Oh, because
Yeah.
you want to hear it, man. It sounds pretty good.
All right.
It sounded like you crushed it when you said it aside. That was like totally like a Muppets like set the thing down. It's like
You can add the sound effect of what's the one that Red Letter Media guys always use, the breaking glass.
it sounded like that. So, alrighty, here we go, rolling again. And since there wasn't a ton of prep time, I guess we're just gonna continue talking.
Yeah, I don't even know what we're doing.
Talking more shit is just finishing off on that thing. Although,
right.
Of course, the Mormon stories continue to. I don't know. I say like I watch some of their videos and I just hope in this video there's nothing to complain about. Like I really do. I sit there and go like, come on, just do good. Just and every single time there's still something. I told somebody in one of the comments once that I was gonna go ahead and compliment him once that I watched one episode about the guy who's a drummer. I thought that I didn't have a ton to complain about in that episode. So I got through one episode without like a ton of things.
Yeah,
but then the most recent. Go ahead.
I haven't, like, since the thing we've been covering from like 2 weeks ago now, I haven't listened to anything.
Yeah, and I'm still gonna cover more of that same one where they're talking about what they hate about being the podcast, because I have like a whole list of stuff that we're barely even getting to.
Yeah, we got halfway into that.
Yeah, not even halfway. We got
half an hour.
A sixth of it into it. But the first thing I wanted to show is, so look at this. This is Glenn Greenwald. And an hour and a half. He just barely released this week. Can you hear it?
Hey everyone, it's Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah. You hear it?
Welcome to what I may call the new episode of System Update. I say that because what's about to follow is not actually something I necessarily recommend that you watch, but I published it anyway for reasons I'm about to explain. A few months ago, I had said on Twitter that there were a lot of people expressing various criticisms of me over social media in a venue that's not very conducive to subjecting those critiques to critical scrutiny. They usually, social media encourages just my insults. And I invited critics who were interested in actually having a substantive one-on-one discussion with me about criticisms they believe are valid about my work to step forward and volunteer to basically talk to me about those criticisms instead of just.
So he's got like something like, well, on this podcast, about 90,000 followers, 92 or something like that. He used to have more, but he had to do a switcheroo when he left his previous company. But he took the time on Twitter to say, hey, let me talk to my critics. And he had a bunch of different ones come on and he gave them like a whole hour. And he gave this kid who just has, that's what he says, I don't recommend watching it, but he gave this kid who just has terrible, like he's just a kid from Twitter and he only put up like his first name. And most of his stuff is just very basic stuff that Glenn's answered 1,000 times. But Glenn still took the time to put on just random people from Twitter on his national show.
That's also something.
Just some kid.
Just some kid.
We can see his Invisalign teeth straighteners.
Yeah, awesome. and his criticisms aren't bad. And it's mostly just the typical stuff he's on Twitter that you never critique. You never critique the right, man. You only critique the left now. He actually gives an answer to that.
There's some free-floating, view that exists in liberal culture that's a liberal orthodoxy or a liberal piety. I'll just attack that. I'll critique that. I'll, dissect that. But, my views of Fox aren't a secret. I'll tell you exactly what they are, which is if you look at the issues on which I've most focused over the past 5 years, I think you can maybe break them down into 3 broad topics. One would be Russiagate, which was the dominant scandal in American political life for at least 3 years, if not the entire Trump presidency. The second would be debates about free speech and increasing censorship on the part of Silicon Valley monopolies, Google and Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Apple in particular, and their increasing control over discourse over the internet. And then the third is the role of the FBI, the role of the CIA, the treachery, and the kind of toxic role that they play in American political life. It is the case that on all 3 of those issues, Russiagate, free speech issues, and the CIA and the FBI, I think that Fox has gotten those stories more right than the vast bulk of the rest of the corporate media.
All those stories are stories that probably at one point in time should have been the left wing, like Greenwald, who really holds on to what his actual principles are. They should have been things that at least the old left wing was against, you know.
If I go to Glenn Greenwald's Wikipedia page right now, will there be some reference calling him part of the alt-right?
He's now for sure alt-right. Same with Matt Taibbi. Anybody who's on the wrong side of what I call neoliberal regime right now, they'll just immediately start throwing out those smears as soon as they...
He used to be public enemy number one to the right, you know.
But he just holds, and really what it is the same principles. He's holding to free speech issues. He's holding to fake CIA and FBI issues, all issues that used to be left-wing pets. But so this guy says, well, all of your stuff seems to be directed at the left lately, and you don't ever direct stuff at the right. And the other reason I was pointing out that, he gives an answer to it. He uses like Noam Chomsky and says, well, Noam Chomsky used to get that complaint. And Noam Chomsky used to always say, well, my answer to that is you have plenty. I critique the United States. You have plenty of the other people critiquing the other countries. At least in Noam Chomsky's time, he could make a claim that, well, I'm the only one really complaining about the United States. And I bring that up because we're here to complain once again about the Mormon Stories, ex-Mormon podcasting community. They say, well, why don't you put in your complaints to the big church, because it has more dollars, the type thing. And part of that is you got those podcasts. Go find those podcasts. Those podcasts are everywhere.
Yeah, and like, I mean, we could do it. It's just frankly, I've done so much of it already in the past 20 years. For me, that part's boring. But you know what?
It slips out too.
I finally remembered I wanted to read something to you on, you know, I want to do a series of The World Started Yesterday. And because, you know, and this obviously it's not just Mormon stories, but there's a woke narrative in general about American history as it relates to Native Americans. And so I want to read you this poem, just five or six stanzas, I think is all we have of it here. It's not the complete thing. And see if you can tell me what person in time wrote this. The white man sought undying fame and plowed the trackless deep. For weary years he toiled in vain where howling tempests sweep. At length he found the Indian's land. In joy he trod the shore. The red man took him by the hand, and freedom knew no more. We strove in vain, 'twas vain to try. The white man's knife was long. Thickly in death our warriors lie. Hoarse winds their funeral song. The pale face took our food and land. Our game is killed and gone. They've left us only sterile sand to leave our children on. How sad the tear that dims the eye, as o'er these vales we tread. Here our brave forefathers lie, there sleeps the mighty dead. O sacrilegious, powerful race, how oft your plowshares bring to view the bones from their long resting place of kindred warriors, brave and true. Like, what kind of person would write that, and in what decade or century?
That's got to be... Was he talking positively about Native Americans?
And also, I mean, and the deep critique of white colonialism.
It could not have been before last year, because last week was the very first time anybody thought of colonialism.
Well, because critical race theory is just about teaching American history. Anyway, the big reveal is it's by Amicus, obviously a pseudonym, but Amicus, Latin for friend. This was written by a white Mormon pioneer settler in 1851. My great-great-grandpa. He was like right there, 1851, the middle of the 19th century. This guy published newspapers. He was a polygamous Mormon. He's part, you know, like I said, white guy, and he settled all over the West. He was a colonizer. And he wrote this poem, and he did a gajillion other things with and on behalf of Native Americans. And see, like, I grew up with this story because this is in his book, his autobiography that his son wrote. And so, like, since I was a kid, like, I knew about, like, Well, no, not everybody. Like, not all white Americans just saw them as savages, to be mistreated. Like, no, there was always a struggle there.
Yeah.
There was, oh yeah, but in the woke world that started yesterday,
I think
no, there's no such thing as that person. That, like, I'm an asshole for bringing up the idea, just to even bring it up, that the notion that not all white people were just plain evil racists, that it couldn't be that simple.
don't you see that they're eroticizing them? My grandparents, even my family had a little bit of a Elizabeth Warren history, in the sense that we thought that we had some Native American blood in us, because there was some adopted grandparent who had darker skin and darker hair, and it was a point of pride in us forever and ever, just like it was in Elizabeth Warren's family. Strange how that was a point of pride even back in like the 70s and 80s or whatever. And I never really ran around saying it, but I know my grandparents did. Those racist coal mining Western Irish Mormons. DNA test came around and we were able to test and find out it ain't true. It weren't true.
Yeah.
But,
And so there's always been that desire. People wanted, I mean, like, obviously the woke have their criticism of that, saying, oh, it's recentering. And I mean, they've got a million different phrases for trying to make it into something nefarious.
my dad found out just a couple years before my grandma died, and she was kind of out of it in her last couple of years, and he didn't have the heart. He never told her. He let her believe it to the grave.
Yeah.
But it was a point of pride. It was always a point of pride for him. But the truth of it is we were fully Irish, and I have a belief that our Irishness, we wiped that away with our Mormonism and even those other things, because at one point in time in the history of the United States, it was so verboten to be Irish. Irish do not apply type stuff, that they search for some sort of way to get outside of the identity.
Topical, Whoopi Goldberg. I remember as a kid being like, huh. But then I'm like, Sammy Davis Jr. is a Jew. Okay. Like, sure. But yeah, then I found out, like, oh no, she's got nothing to do with Germany, Jews, Yiddish, nothing. And it was literally just a career move. Like, oh. And like all this shit going
somebody
on,
said
kind of bugs me. Like, I like her. Like,
her first name came from a joke. It came from a joke of a fart. Whoopi came from a fart, and so somebody says her stage name is actually Gassy Jew.
It's kind of like Yahoo Serious. Remember him?
Yeah. But somebody, I think I sent it to you, somebody is complaining out there that Whoopi Goldberg should get rid of that last name now that she said this.
Yeah, no, this is all of this bugs me, because like, I like Whoopi Goldberg. I've been a fan of her since I was a kid. She was awesome Ghost, and I love Star Trek and all that stuff. Jumping Jack Flash.
I remember Jumping Jack Flash being one of like the first Saturday television movies that was on every single Saturday forever, and I don't even know why.
Yeah, it must have been some kind of weird arcane.
There was such weird Saturday movies when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They Live was on constantly, and Jumping Jack Flash was on constantly, and I don't even know why, but like, I mean, on repeat, like once every couple months you'd catch them or something.
A couple of them that were good, really good underrated movies, like Enemy Mine. That was one of those Saturday morning TV movies. Did you ever watch that?
Oh,
jeez, well, that's
unless I did. I mean,
Red Letter Media, they just did a review of it.
I have to look at it, because I mean, I caught, when we were young, everybody caught the same stuff. So if it was just sitting on a Saturday, I probably caught it. But
we're going to talk about movies, because your podcast with Kevin, where you talked about The Nothing, and it made me want to revisit Neverending Story. And holy crap, does that hold up? But then I had the fun moment where it's because, like, I hadn't watched that since I was a kid. And, when I was a kid, I didn't care about filmmakers. I'm like, who made this movie? And then, like, when I found out it was Wolfgang Peterson, I was like, oh, well, that explains why it's so efficient and tight. Like, that movie is so good.
Done
like,
on the
there's nothing is wasted. It's so tight. It's wonderful. Anyway, that's filmmaking.
I sometimes make a joke, though. The one thing that's a little too tight about it is when I was a little kid, I remember when the horse went down the swamp. I was like, no, his best friend, my best friend, the best friend's going down the swamp. And then when I watched it as an adult, I was like, wait a minute, they just rode and had breakfast and the horse gave up. Like,
that did kind of strike me. And then that's the other thing I learned, was that it's only the first half of the novel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I watched the second one, and it's not nearly as good, but it's not bad. But it's also kind of weird. Had Jonathan Brandis in it.
Yeah, I think that kind of story needs a really good storyteller, and I think Wolfgang Peterson
Yeah,
was the right guy for that job. What else?
but
Did
if
I
they
don't even know.
reboot it, they'll mess it up. So
Oh God,
can't have that.
can you imagine the woke take? the nothing will be replaced with a Trump rally.
Oh, and then the little princess will recite Derrida to us about words.
The
So,
swamp of sadness will be just called the swamp of capitalism.
words are only relational. Doesn't matter what you name me. You can't assign me a you can't
Silence
assign
is
me a label.
violence.
Oh man. You need to dead name your mother. No, don't. Okay.
Why did the warrior have to be a young man?
You want to know what? If you want to talk about early concepts of transgenderism, I remember watching that as a kid, and I couldn't tell if those boys were girls or not, or at least the warrior kid. I thought when I was a little guy, I could not tell if Atreyu was male or female.
Yeah.
That used to trip me out. I used to be like, "Is that a guy? Is that a girl?" I can't tell.
Yeah, things like, and you can almost imagine that Wolfgang Peterson and his crew might be the kinds of filmmakers that are good enough to intentionally
Who did that
do
on
that.
purpose?
Yeah, and because it's good storytelling, because it's important that your protagonist is relatable. Yeah. And if you can make him relatable to more people, that's good storytelling. And these are all things that this is all anathema to woke storytelling, by the way.
Yeah. Storytelling. Okay, dokie. Let's get. I think I have like a list of
stories are just hegemonic discourse, right?
Yeah, yeah. Unless they are stories by the right identity.
Being read by the right person and listened to in the right
person.
And if you're listening to it, you have to be listening to it in the right context.
Yes.
God, it's all church. It really is so religious.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let's get us some more church religious. With the story churchies. I was thinking about ordering one of those Thrive hats, so that if we do episodes where we're bashing on Mormons, I'll put it on as my anti-Mormon hat. We could both get them. And so the people will know when we're being explicitly anti-Mormon. We'll just put that hat on.
All right. I kind of got notes this time, so maybe we can get through it faster.
It's Otherton, except
let's listen to what they say.
I was depressed for many, many years during and after my faith crisis. And for me, it was essential. Other people are going to feel differently. Some people just want to drop Mormonism and walk away and leave it forever. For me, I found meaning and purpose in channeling my pain and suffering and my depression into a new purpose in life. And so for me, that's how I got out of my depression. That's how I got out of my funk. That's how I got my sense of meaning and purpose and identity, and even spirituality and community. I lost so much when I left the church.
I think that part
any religious convert could tell that story.
Yeah, exactly. You picked up on what I picked up. I mean, it's just kind of obvious, but I mean, half the points that we're making is that it's just more church.
That's the story of religious conversion from anything to anything.
And he just barely put out something this week about go listen to this podcast about nihilism. And I listened to the nihilism podcast. And inside that nihilism podcast, there's a religious story in that nihilism podcast. Like, you just got to accept the nihilism into your heart, and then you can find meaning. And you're just like, it's that same thing that you have that drives you nuts when people talk about atheism and they don't get that it's just like the null. It's
I like the way I put it. Atheism has exactly one opinion on exactly one question. Literally nothing else follows.
Yeah. And I see so many times in like the ex-Mormon Facebook groups, they'll say something like, I expected more from you ex-Mormons than this, like pointing out something. And I'm looking, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, the ex-Mormons are a thing, they're a community that you have expectations of.
Yeah, no, yeah. Like, what do you expect from the No Golf Club? Because I was thinking, I've been expanding my no golf club analogy, because like, there's a whole conversation about like, well, like, what do you guys do? Like, well, we don't play golf. Well, like, what binds you not playing golf? Like, so you hate golf? No, I just don't play it. That guy really hates golf, but not like what kind of club is that? There's nothing there. And like, it's funny because like from both sides of it, watching people trying to make a community out of, I don't believe in God. It just doesn't work.
Even the nihilism stuff. Every time you hear people talk about nihilism, accepting nihilism, I used to read a bit of the existentialist Sartre, or however you say it, and he used to kind of double in that philosophical way of using a double meaning of a word, like you got to be full nihilist to have full meaning type bullcrap. That I think they just only do that contradictory thing to sound deep when they don't even know what the crap they're talking about when they do that. Yeah. But nihilism, I've called myself an atheist. I've never called myself a nihilist because I think it's darn near possible to act actually as a nihilist. Like you have to kind of care about something, do about something. Like real true nihilism is it does not follow that humans should exist or should even live or anything. That doesn't mean you got to go kill them or anything like that. It's just any sort of should just doesn't even follow from nihilism. Say what you want about the National Socialists. At least that's an ethos.
Yeah, that's like, I don't know exactly how to put it, but it's like philosophically, nihilism, sure, you can kind of make sense of it, but then there's reality. And
you can't do it, even if it's true, you can't do it, and these guys for sure aren't doing it. It's kind of like these guys are doing church, they're not doing nihilism.
It's like one of my favorite little pithy Christopher Hitchens sayings is, of course free will exists, the boss insists upon it. Like that's like the inverse of nihilism, but like, we're stuck on planet Earth, with the limited, we're mortal on Earth, and entropy, we got to deal with that. So yeah, we got to eat and move and destroy and build and all the things.
Yeah, I saw this, maybe I could pull it up. I saw this meme it was a philosopher's meme, and they found some bot, and the bot said, I discovered fighting against entropy can be the only moral. And it's just, it's impossible to explain, especially kind of when it's like at this bubblegum level, but they're going to teach us how to be proper ex-Mormons some more.
All right. Well, the next one is related to what we just said, but I'm going to drill into it just a bit. It's kind of like the cause. And, we get accused of all sorts of terrible motives. Cause. Like, just
the message,
just the stuff about like we destroy, the most common one I get is that I exist to tear down people's faith. That
this is the same episode where they were talking about the slingshot. We're still in that episode, even though it's been a week or so for us.
I think if he did exist to tear down faith, like literally nothing else, he'd have probably a bigger audience. But he doesn't just exist to tear down faith. There's more to it than just that.
But at the same time, too, is like
but he's
they do it.
Faith.
They so obviously do it. It's one of the things they do. But like,
I do it.
Issues
I
like
just don't
why
charge
deny
for it.
Like why?
Yeah. Like no, I do it. I just don't think it's worth money.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the bottom line of it, is that they see that there's money in trying to fight off being claimed people who do that, but you do that. So
yeah, they absolutely do it. So yeah, it's creepy that you deny it. Like
if you're in constant transparency mode, you just admit it. And as you do constantly, half of what Flip and I point out in this is that they're constantly contradictory. But you point out in this several different times that you do try to tear it down. Your mission is to tear it down. You try to tear it down. If we come at you, we're gonna stop the work of tearing it down. It's there. So why throw a tantrum if people say, I noticed a thing?
Yeah, exactly.
It's called a spiritual Jack Kevorkian. That I'm like Dracula trying to suck the blood of people's faith, or that, some of the worst stuff just in the past year that we're trying to make money. We're grifters trying to make money off of people's pain and suffering, that we create a faith crisis so that we can then get rich off of like trying to
can you pause
provide the solution to a faith crisis.
See, that's one of those contradictions. because we know in other parts of other podcasts, and maybe this one, I know for sure other ones, where he's talking about, well, why is it okay for him to make money? And he talks about his product. And his product is helping people with faith crises.
Exactly.
Like, he's directly contradicting himself. He's like, oh, we don't just, we're here to make money off of people's faith. Yes, you are, by your own admission. And here he is like doing exactly what the church does, trying to play both sides of this thing. It's amazing the lack of self-awareness. That's I just can't get that part. We're like,
it's
how
either
do you
lack.
not see it, John?
Well, it's always the question of, is it lack of self-awareness, or is it you kind of got to play both sides of it to keep the donate button going over there?
Well, I mean, I guess that we've answered our question, because everybody always asks, they always want to know, like, did Joseph Smith really believe it? Did L. Ron Hubbard really believe it? Does John Dehlin really believe it?
Yeah.
I think the answer is yes and no in all cases.
In all cases.
Yeah.
So it's fine. We're going to have detractors. We're going to spend a whole section talking about that. But let me just be clear. For the record.
Oh, I was going to say it's just one of the main basic points from Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil is that nobody can really get outside any sort of even philosopher you come across. And the postmodernists ran with this all the way. Nietzsche's point was a bit more subtle, but it's just, if you really have an angle and you really have a direction on something, you can't help but entwining that in your needs, in your angles, in your growth, in your trying to bring people to your following.
Set the speed to faster speed. Remember that was that. Well, yeah, that was a good strategy to help us get through this crap. 1.5 was good, right?
I think so.
That's what we did the last one.
I do and don't do this. I don't do this to destroy the Mormon church. I don't do this to take away people's faith. I don't do this for the money. I don't do this for the fame.
Those are just
I don't do
perks.
this for the
destroying the church is just a bonus. Your job is to what? Talk on a camera about destroying the church. That's what you're about. Like, God damn it. You said you hosted a guy on your show that said that every BYU professor that cares about gay teens needs to resign, even if it costs them their retirement. Like, really, he says that. Like, even if it costs you your retirement, your 401k, like they don't have families with children and dreams and stuff. Like, what if they're taking care of somebody with a chronic illness and they need their damn insurance? You know, these assholes say quit your job. like that's what they think of the church. And here he is
once
saying,
again,
like
if we had like other sort of news places that talk back and forth with each other, and they have teams of people who do edits. If we had edits that could go through all the edits of history of them obviously doing that,
direct and saying that they're doing that, and taking credit for it and showing pride in it.
Yep. And admonishing you for getting in their way of doing that.
Yeah.
attention. I do this because I went through a faith crisis in a high demand religion or cult. And it was devastating to me and my marriage and my kids and my family. And I saw that not only was this happening to thousands and thousands of people around me, but that the Mormon church literally had nothing to help people like us.
See, and all of that's true about me too. But John Lynn saw one thing more. He saw a career.
Yeah.
And I just walked away.
You also said too that like they helped you, that they had some sort of scaffolding there trying to help and sending to therapists and that sort of stuff. It wasn't zero, but I'm sure that was also a recent development. They probably didn't in the 70s or 80s or something like that.
No, that is fun. Like when you talk to people that like left the church in like 1958, that is fascinating. That's a different thing. That's like, you know, the people who were openly transvestites in 1958. I've been talking about Ed Wood a lot. I was talking a lot about Ed Wood at work, so I'm thinking about transvestites.
Yeah, Ed Wood. That's such a good movie.
Man, did you ever see Glenn or Glenda? Pull the strings, Bela Lugosi.
I think I did. Yeah, right around the same time I watched that movie. Of course, you go watch everything you can from.
Yeah, boy, we really ought to like watching that in light of the culture today. Really would be fascinating because that movie is so interesting in that it's incredibly brave. I mean, it's okay, just so people know what we're talking about. In what, like 1958, I think it was, a terrible movie maker. I mean, I don't know. He made terrible movies. I'm saying he was a terrible person. Nobody knows. but he was Ed Wood, and he's famous for making a lot of terrible movies.
Well, he
And he made a
supposedly
movie-
did drag Bela Lugosi
Yeah,
out like on his
he
deathbed.
was a
but-
transvestite, yeah, and he made this movie called Glenn or Glenda, and like, I mean, the movie's totally unfocused. It's part docudrama, part like educational film, and part narrative drama. And it's about transvesticism, and then it's fun because it's a terribly made movie, and like it's like just such a window into the soul of the maker. But like, I can just, even from memory, it's been 20 years since I watched it. Like, I know if we watched it now, the woke would find a million things wrong with it, even though it was this movie in 1958 about how like some men just feel better wearing women's clothing, and we should leave them alone.
He would have said it wrong. He didn't say it properly with the Jack Havelstram's or Judith Butler's approval of the proper
Exactly.
wording, which you, even if you knew all that wording, you couldn't get it right.
And I'm sure he didn't have the correct, cultural consciousness, about why he was doing it. I think he was just a guy who liked cashmere. All right, we got to do movie club shows.
What was it? Auto something?
Autoerotic asphyxiation.
No, the other one.
Oh,
autogynephilia.
autogynephilia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it was some of that.
Yeah. No, that's a no word. That's not a real
Oh, I
thing.
said it. Oh gosh.
And so I said, it's just like the guy walking along the shore, seeing the starfish in the sand on the side of the beach. And I'm like, hey, I can help that starfish. Oh, wow, I can help that starfish. Ooh, if I use the internet, I can help 12 starfish at once.
In your
it was
case,
all
it wasn't a
about-
starfish, it was a sand dollar.
Informed consent so that people could be in Mormonism.
And he didn't throw it out.
He put that in the bake.
He put it in his pocket.
Or join Mormonism with full knowledge of what they were being a part of, because so many of us were deceived or misled, either being raised in it or joining it. So it's all about informed consent. It's about alleviating the suffering of those who are in a faith crisis. And then just to see the collateral damage of people leave it, not having any idea how to rebuild. I love this Thrive kind of like idea. And all it is an
The whole informed consent thing. I mean, that's part of the reasons why we're going to be getting into this book a little bit. But part of this whole world is it's so smokescreeny that there's all sorts of stuff in the academic world, especially invaded into the psychology world, and some of these things that he regurgitates that have all sorts of double meanings and double sides to it that are the opposite of informed consent when you're getting into those worldviews, and these guys regurgitate them.
With him pointing at that hat with his dumb logo, and there's a question that I wish I could ask John DeLynn and get a real answer, because I wonder what he would say if he could say anything. Is can or does anybody thrive within Mormonism, and is that okay?
I think it'd be a
people who
yes,
thrive in
but, and then
Mormonism.
yes, but, and then if you look at the end of his but, you'll be like, well, then that's no but. Like,
Yeah.
Or that's no yes. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Probably, yeah, because I wonder. I mean, because that's the thing.
yes,
like,
but informed
would-
consent matters, and causing harm
yeah.
matters, and what the long list, But look at this. This is not advertised.
It's a great way you stop that. Can you make that a
Yeah.
thumbnail?
Yeah, that would have been good. I'll come back to it.
I want to do a whole episode on Unite the Thrive. I kind of want to go to one of these events.
after leaving the
Yeah.
Hagman
Just
religion,
to see
because
what's
honestly, I wasn't so sure.
do not.
When I left it, I wasn't so sure I'd be able to have a happy, healthy marriage. Because honestly, I wasn't so sure. When I left it, I wasn't so sure I'd be able to have a happy, healthy marriage. Be a faithful husband, be a good dad, do good in the, become a healthy, moral, happy person.
You didn't see the roadmap.
No, there weren't role models for that. There was just like people who disappeared or who
Do you know how?
ended up-
Like, I didn't
There weren't role
think
models
that
for
way at all. Like, why didn't
Yeah,
was I supposed to think like that?
Yeah, no. Again, like I didn't think I need a role model for not believing in this anymore. What? I don't quite understand it.
Part of my whole issue is I do think some people need nursed out. If they're gonna leave, they need to be nursed out of, hey, hold up, you could get swindled into all sorts of things, and not just Scientology or Catholicism or whatever. Like, you might be jumping out of the frying pan into the fryer, but that's just more kind of saying stop and really, really critical think not just critical think to the things John DeLynn says critical think to all things, like even things that you're getting from universities.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I what you should go do, how you should raise your kids, how you should be with your kids. I mean,
See, I don't understand how anybody like an adult educated guy in America, like, what do you mean? Like, as a Mormon, did you really just understand child raising from inside Mormonism, and like all the rest of civilization was just darkness? You know, because like that was like for me one of my faith struggles was, you know, as a missionary being inside of 1,000 different homes of all different religious and non-religious stripes, realizing that like, oh well, like there's nothing special about Mormon families. I can't see that Mormon families are that nothing, you know, as much as they
part of
stress
what
it, you'd think something, you think there would be something significant there that noticeable. And I realized like, well, no, all of the good things about family life that Mormonism advances, advocates for, can be had without being a Mormon.
But you gotta aim up. You gotta choose something good. And the same thing too is you're gonna have to choose something that doesn't have a perfect past, like liberalism or believing in science, or, you know, if you're gonna hold everything to some, Mormonism kind of sets itself up to say, hey, we always kind of had these
Yeah.
perfect morals and truths, but there's all sorts of other paradigms that also weren't perfect, but they never even tried to claim that. They just claimed
Yeah.
that hey, we can start working on getting it right. That's the point of like the scientific liberalism enlightenment worldview. And
Yes.
maybe you can
I
return to religions looking like that. But part of what I'm distressed about is not that he's saying this, is that I do think so many people leaving Mormonism think that way. And I just, it's half of what's blowing my mind and half of why I'm thinking like, what the heck is happening in this whole ex-Mormon community, you know?
I guess I don't know. I mean, there's enough people in the world. There's all kinds of people, but you know, are there really people who are like, well, I no longer have faith. I no longer have a testimony in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Is stealing still wrong? Is it okay to cheat on my wife?
Well,
Should I kick children for
but
fun?
those are the basic stuff. But there is such a huge problem, and that's half of the issue that we're trying to get at, is that you fall out of it, and then in a weird way you go and become an even worse Puritan in different ways. And
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess because I mean, if we accept that as a, let's just accept as true for the purposes of this, that idea that like people need religion, or at least in general, not everybody, or you know, whatever. People need to believe in something. So in that case, like you leave Mormonism and you gloop into something else and thrive. And Mormon Stories is just like a denomination, like it's a denomination of wokeness, and wokeness is a denomination of of optional faiths to adopt when leaving a formal religion. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but like, I mean, a lot of people kind of say that, like, well, yeah, people just need religion. It's got to be something, but I don't think I have a something.
But
At least
I
nothing on
think
the
that's
level
kind of
that.
the difference in maybe personalities. Like people who are more individualists are going to be fine, but there's other people who just kind of think they need a collective whatever, and they go jump into the next thing, which is usually some sort of statism, which is the big problem with it. And it just blows my mind that it has to be that way. And individualism doesn't mean that you don't have to go form relationships. Of course, you got to go form relationships. It's just you're
Yeah.
not trying to create this kind of like group blob identity in any sort of thing beyond a group of individualists. So
Well,
that's the
yeah, because I mean,
contradiction.
I guess I'm a wacky old what liberal, what's it called? I don't know what the exact word is, but like for me, like it's like, okay, we gotta have something. We gotta have something that we all agree on. And for me, like Constitution and Bill of Rights, like that's about
Yeah.
the best thing. That's about the best thing humanity has ever come up with, as far as, okay, as long as everybody's on board with this thing, Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you know, like
And the reason that
that.
one works better than other status things is that those Bill of Rights and constitutions are laws about what the collective can't do to you.
Yeah, no, it's way more about what you cannot do. And
Yeah.
like and that's it's one of the very few like national identities built on pluralism
Yeah.
and not in spite of it. And like and these for me these are all reasons like and because I guess that's my faith. I have faith that liberal democracy
Me
is
too.
a better way to get along than whatever shit John
And
Delin's advancing.
that's part of like what the really conservative critique is of the liberalism of the liberalism of Lindsay and Pluckrose, that James Lindsay's going through it on Twitter right now, that he's fighting with like the ultra conservatives who are just saying that you guys who want to, I sometimes say it's like you're liberal Amish. Like liberalism was good up to this point and let's stop it. but they say no matter what, it only goes that direction. We need to return to a full traditionalism, and it becomes another identity thing, but it's more based in some traditional religion than in ethnic identity, although some of those are ethnic. But it ends up being a bit of the same thing, the pre-modern thing and the postmodern thing. But it was only ever really the Enlightenment liberalism that tried to say, hey, stuff's like your morality's got to come from inside you out. The Jordan Peterson thing, clean your own room, be your own person, aim up, that sort of stuff. And I always thought that was a perfectly good ethos to fall into. But obviously people need something more. They need to jump into some sort of mob, and I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, because liberal democracy, it demands pluralism, like I said before, and
Yeah.
it says like it says not only will people disagree, but this is here's a way that we can all live together, even though we totally disagree. But
And the
you
neo
have to be
reaction. Go ahead.
what I was
Finish
gonna
your
say is
thing.
like part of the problem is that like the woke are utterly obsessed with power, totally obsessed with power, and with a guy like John Dehlin, you can kind of see that.
Yeah, they
It's
confess it.
really
They
obvious.
confess it
Like,
all the time. When they
yeah.
go saying that it's all this is about power, you make it so that all you can be doing is about power too.
And that's the thing that like this is why I realized when I was a kid, I always thought like the Holocaust survivors would come to my school and say, your freedom is fragile and has to be vigilantly preserved.
It's got to be
And like,
safeguarded.
yeah, and I realized, and that's because like there's a million John Delins in the world that if they see the power opportunity, they're gonna go that direction. I'm not interested in power. So for me, like liberal democracy is just yeah, like that's my favorite form.
That is what the neo-reactionary critique of it is, though. Is they'll say no matter what, it's going to turn into group identities and tribalism. So you might as well make your tribe, and it might as well be us. But that's also always been the warning that we've given to the postmodernists, is that if you say it's all just power, well then you're giving permission for the other ones to say, okay, power it is.
I mean that was basically Hitler's whole position.
Yeah.
Like I mean, some of the last stuff he wrote before he killed himself was about how like the stupid capitalist forced me into this war. Like you made me do it. And his whole justification is like, well, I better start the war before they war me.
Yeah.
It's neurotic. It's psychotic. But I guess
it's reactionary. But getting this way creates the reactionaries. Weimar Germany created the reactionaries. The Jacobins created the reactionaries, and we're just in the same old cycle. It's the same thing as ever.
Yeah.
But it always seems like, and maybe we got to live through one of the peaks of it through the 80s and 90s in the United States. But
yeah, no, like I mean, I really like looking back, and I think like 1998 was like it was the pinnacle of I don't know what the word is, just like
liberalism.
egalitarian pluralistic liberalism in America. Like with them, I really think was the Seinfeld. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Where it's like
the white cookie and the black cookie work together, and then we got swallowed.
Yeah. When Star Trek: The Next Generation was about liberal principles,
that's why I had somebody, a younger guy.
Socialist shit.
a younger guy who hadn't watched any of it asked me, "What do you mean whenever you keep mentioning liberal, like Star Trek? The future's not Star Trek." And I say, "Well, it's liberalism. It's like the fantasy liberalism of liberalism really won, and all we do is go around the universe teaching the very smart ways to other races
Yeah,
about
no,
why."
like but that's like so much of Gene Roddenberry's vision. Like apparently, like he talked about, to the writers, even on Next Generation, where he's like, the characters on the show aren't supposed to have interpersonal conflicts. Those are solved. This is about
at least within the
humanity
Enterprise
confronting,
themselves.
within the crew of the Enterprise themselves. Because like that's the idea. Is like, the Federation, they have figured out how to live together. Now it's about us versus the galaxy, the universe, and all whatever weird energy being or whatever we encounter this time. And of course, it's all just a vehicle to talk about human psyche and society and all that stuff.
The very first episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation that puts liberalism on trial. I was pretty surprised to find that out. But it really is just kind of that utopian idea, and then all these different voices matter. There's no differences between the others, but it still has like a hierarchy of who you defer to, but everybody's kind of making the same amounts. It's not exactly equal, but they're also in a post-scarcity society, which he partially wrote that in just so that there wouldn't be communist arguments in it. It's like we're past that. We're gonna talk about.
That was Gene Roddenberry. Like he started out, he wanted to just write about social issues, and he was just writing contemporary stuff, and the censors were like, no.
So
and
of course
like,
they're changing that in all the modern Star Trek, and they're turning it
they're
to
completely
crap.
changing it. But because like what was brilliant about the thing that made Gene Roddenberry brilliant, his smart move to get around the TV censors, because he's like, well, I want to do a story where a white guy kisses a black woman, and they're like, nah, we can't do that. And then he realized, like, what if I just make the woman a space alien? And the censor's like, oh, that's fine, and then like the moving on in history, like when you like watching how censorship has changed in culture, the brilliant thing the South Park creators did was they're like, what if we just have 8-year-olds say it?
Yeah.
And like, because that's the thing, like they were able to get around the censors. They're like, it's just kids, really, because kids say.
The thing is, like, the Orville really continues it. It does pretty well.
I've watched zero. Like the only Orville I've ever seen is promos.
I just
I've never watched it. But people tell me like I guess I need to do it because people say like if you miss Star Trek, watch Orville.
So McFarlane's like he's pretty Bernie-ish left wing, but I mean there's episodes in there where he goes to a planet where the system of judiciary, jurisprudence on that planet is by popular belief and up and down votes and stuff like that. And of course that planet's a mess. And it's just a great point for coming from a super left-wing dude, but it's because he really kind of holds to old liberalism. Like a lot of people are now calling Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi or Bill Maher alt-right right-wingers because they're holding on to that liberalism that we used to argue within liberalism if it's a little bit hot or a little bit cold within liberalism, but it was all within liberalism. And
like it really was kind of a jolt to my system a couple of years ago, like because for years and years and years with increasing frequency I just get accused out of the blue of being alt-right and Republican and conservative and all these things. I'm like, what the hell is going on?
You just said you like free speech. You're alt-right.
Yeah, like I believe in due process, alt-right. And then I realized like I'm to the left of Bill Clinton in 1996.
Yep.
But to today's left, yeah.
Yeah, and they've gone and problematized all of Star Trek. The whole recent Picard episodes are about him going around and apologizing for his toxic masculinity, which we're coming up on John DeLynn doing his apology tour at the end of this, the same way as the new Picard series is about, I gotta apologize. And then now the Federation is all having infighting because it turned out that they weren't ever really equal with the women and the this and the that.
Better or
Have we made it 3 minutes?
Well, I've got jumps here, so this one won't be so bad.
So those are my motives. You make any accusation you want. I'm going to go on the public record and state what my motives are. It's been to alleviate suffering of people like us and to promote.
And one of your motives is to make a living.
He's going on record with. I'm going on record that everything I do is just benevolence, and everything that they do can't be benevolent.
And he gives it away. Also, give me money.
Healing and growth. And I don't do this for the money, but I need money to do this, or I just can't do it. So those are my motives. And
That's one of the things is like we could take his
yeah,
words and
I mean, I already put my offer on the table. Like, he says he's worth $300,000 a year as a clinical psychologist, and then he says he can be a millionaire in the tech sector. Like, I'll do $4,000 a month, and with dental and medical, and yeah, I'll talk to Mormons and save the young gays. Like,
so
it's not hard. I
you
can
can
talk
cut
like
and
John
paste
Lewin.
this talk, and the things that could be true or could not be true, but you can cut and paste this talk with any sort of group that's made money in the past several years. In fact, we just saw that video by Short Fat Otaku. Maybe I'll put it in things about the BLM misuse of money. He did a pretty good
Holy
report on that just
crap.
this week. And you can listen to like the talking on a podcast at the end of the podcast and just compare it right up to this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
It
But
sounds
boy, yeah,
exactly
that
the
was
same.
like I already knew there was like I mean, just on the surface, it's obvious that there's something fishy going on there. Because I mean, like, they talk about like something like what $3 billion worth of corporate donations have gone to BLM. And these guys say that the church could end world hunger, with a few $1 billion. So we gave BLM the $3 billion and BLM's mission, Black Lives Matter, is to, improve the situation in communities, in Black communities that, are most affected by all kinds of violence and deprivation and poverty and all this shit. What the hell have they done? Like, they defunded the Minneapolis police. I mean,
he's got a long list of different
how
people who
many
got
billions,
their
like,
art projects funded who were already kind of rich, wealthy people.
like, yeah, well, that, but like, because you think like, well, wouldn't you throw some money at the community safety officers you talked about? Because the police are no good. You guys have the money now. You guys have the money now to hire the highly trained medical and mental health experts that you insist are what's really needed instead of no, they haven't even done that. It's worse than they start out with a demonstrable falsehood, which is that police are systemically racist and or are hunting young Black men for sport. Like, these are both just falsehoods. They're wrong. We can prove that
And
they're
if you
wrong.
see anything
But even
that
if we
makes your
accept their theory, they haven't even followed through with what they said they needed, that
if
they
you saw
wanted, that they
any
were going to do.
if you saw any sort of cop thing that made your heart hurt and you felt like you were doing something by sending money off to them, you failed. You didn't,
Yeah, but people go watch the Short Fat Otaku, but one of the things he talks about is that the founder paid a ridiculous amount of money for art to some guy.
That's only
Some
like he
guy,
lists a bunch of them,
yeah,
but like that one,
but
that's some guy who
some
is
guy is the father of her child.
yeah, and they tried to act like it wasn't, and it was a ton of money to him.
You
And the
know,
thing is it had nothing to do with BLM, although you can kind of say, well, this
yeah.
is supposedly doing this. And
But
in the
meanwhile, shady
meantime,
nepotism is a Trump thing. That's thing that
yeah.
Trump and Trumpers do, and the kinds of people that vote for Trump. Those are the kinds of people that are okay with that kind of behavior.
But then they get to a podcast where the lady's defending herself because some actual people who were affected by cop shootings and whatnot said, hey, these guys haven't gotten one red cent to us.
Yeah.
They haven't done anything for us. And they're complaining about it. So they come out with this podcast saying, don't listen to the people, even though you think they're on our side, don't listen to them on our side. And it all seems super familiar to any one of these things. And I'm not saying it's apples for apples on this. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah. We're going off on a tangent. But yeah, there's this thing. It's a grift.
Yep.
And John Dehlin is in the same game. He's just a small player.
It's fine. Yeah. And part of the getting the money, and we talk about, there's a portion, and maybe I can skip it just by mentioning it fast, that he talks about the podcasts that do get money and do get donors and that they have to have special high-end donors. Well, that's one of the reasons you do a 501c3, because those high-end donors will only do it if they get it at a tax-deductible reason for doing it.
For
It's
some
not
reason
because
that
they
they
can't
never
just pay
mention that
you for
part.
your product.
Yeah, nobody says like, well, basically they're buying goodwill.
Yeah.
It costs
It's
nothing.
the most amazing cause I've ever been a part of, because I think we make a huge difference. I know we make a huge difference in the lives now of hundreds of thousands of people.
It's the most amazing cause he's ever been a part of. He was a Mormon, then he was a Mormon agitator, and then he wasn't Mormon no more.
It's what he's been doing. He's been doing it all.
But it's the most important one. That reminds me of a friend of ours who I'm talking about. Whatever he's doing at that moment, it's the most important thing I've ever done.
Yeah, this is the most delicious meal I ever had.
And I'm the best at whatever I'm doing now.
But
the world is lucky to have me. Send me
yeah.
money.
But to me, I always still like that Nietzschean line of like, you're still just doing the thing. It's just been a continuance of it, and this was an obvious continuance of the thing. This is actually was always meant to happen in a way.
Yeah.
Stories now has literally impacted hundreds of thousands of lives. That's directly. And then there's the ripple effect of all the lives that have been helped because of the people we directly helped, which literally gets into the millions. Like, that's amazing. And I'm super grateful for it. And I love it. And I think we have one of the best causes ever. And by the way, you may care about LGBT people. You know, you may say, well, I don't care about the religious stuff, but I care about politics. I care about economics. I care about LGBT people or social justice. Well, guess what? When you change members of a conservative, orthodox, high demand religious group, when you help transform them out of unhealthy orthodoxy, you end up making a political difference. You end up making a difference when it comes to LGBT people or women's rights or racial rights, because by and large, the people that leave a high demand, fundamentalist, conservative religious tradition move in healthy directions, I believe, for the overall good of society. So there's kind of a secondary gain that I'm super proud of.
So
This is the way I
took
make a political difference without wanting to get political, without even stating my.
But what is unhealthy orthodoxies? I'm curious.
Without
what you
wanting
would
to
call-
get political, and he just made a whole point that I'm helping changing the politics of people. You know?
Exactly.
And
Also,
that's a reason I should have a 501c3. I'm changing their conservative politics.
Also, like, if you believe that lesbian, gays, bisexuals, LGBT, if you believe that lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender people comprise a group, that's politics. Like that idea, that is a political article of faith.
Block.
It's not real. It's
Mhm.
totally made up, and I know it is because I can. There's a million gays that will tell you that they don't like that. They don't like being just that. You know that they're not the same as that's not how that works. But
that
his
opinion on how it should be done or run or viewed is a political opinion, and he's pushing for politics. And then it's been our very first point on the very first podcast is we're not political, politics, we're not political, politics.
Yeah, and what I'm going to say is that John Dehlin's orthodoxy is an unhealthy orthodoxy. Wokeism is unhealthy orthodoxy, John.
Correct.
Believing that LGBT people comprise some kind of political class, that's an unhealthy orthodoxy.
And there's interest convergence, turning them into a block that you use as a battering ram for your purposes.
Like, seriously, I mean, like, you know, because my cousin, my aunt and uncle adopted Samoan kids. So, like, my cousins, like, there's never been a time in my life that I wasn't running around with Samoan kids. And then, like, in the last few years, suddenly my Samoan cousins are in a political class with Asians. And wait, what? So, like, you know, they were just Samoan adoptees of white people, but now they are actually in a group along with Indians, Bangladeshis, Cambodians, Mongolians. They're all just.
It's like that, the way they've grouped Asians together when they go and try to talk about violence, and then they don't want to talk about what's actually causing them happening with the violence.
You know,
another video you should watch this week is Nuance Bro talking about Asian violence, and
I taught my Samoan cousins to eat with chopsticks. How the hell did that work out?
Let me give back my appropriation. Let me force my appropriation back onto you to make it right.
Yeah, that when I first heard that, like, you know, for white people to make tortillas was like some kind of wickedness on the grounds of cultural appropriation. I just like every meal in my house growing up was like a nightmare of colonialist oppression. Because I mean, like, one of the fun things I loved about my childhood was it because, you know, we got to do things that were so different from everybody else. And for a long time we alternated Christmas, and we would alternate every year German Christmas and Portuguese Christmas. That's what we called it in my house. You know, German Christmas, we got to open presents on Christmas Eve, which was fun for us because everybody else had to wait until the morning. And then on Christmas Day, we would have, you know, Sauerbraten and Pfeffernusse and Klöße and all this stuff. And then Portuguese Christmas, you know, presents on Christmas Day like you do, but the food was bacalhau and azeite and all the classical things. And, you know, like, but now I've come to find out that was all just evil, wicked cultural appropriation. You know, that we would blend the cultures together, you know? And, like, I don't know, because, like, for me, it's just so I feel like I had kryptonite to it, because when people say like, that's cultural appropriation, I'm like, no, it's not. It's what happens when people meet each other and learn from
It's
each other.
intermingling, yeah.
You know, but
And you
yet,
are making it harder for people to ever intermingle.
yeah, but my siblings all grew up in the same house as me, and they're all basically woke to some
Ugh.
degree or another. And like, because that thing's like, for me, because I'm just like, it was just, to me, it was always just obvious, like, okay, that's just stupid, guys. Like all of this dumb stuff. I mean, like, it's something I've gotten like for, before I understood what wokeness was all about. For years I would talk to people, and I would like, and they would get so mad at me when I would bring this up. And I used to be so confused about why they would be so mad. And I would just say, like, when I talk about like, well, the way it, like the way people in America talk about race doesn't really make sense, just because, like, for example, like, they're what people consider a black person in America is not the same as in Brazil, and like just that simple fact, just that simple fact, and people would react with such anger. Now I realize that I was poking at their faith-based axioms, and that's what was
Yep.
making them so angry and defensive. But I used to be just like, no, don't you see that this is like,
Not just that, there it goes with that Rob Henderson, the guy on Twitter who talks about this sort of stuff all the time. It goes against their luxury beliefs that
Yeah.
they've got to hold on to them, and they've got to regurgitate them. And if they get seen saying the other beliefs, they'll get kicked out of the John DeLynn circles. They
yeah.
won't be allowed to be part of that clique.
Neymar Jr., the soccer player, you can look him up. Like, in America, he's African American. That's what people would call him. In fact, we know, and we do, because a journalist said so. There's a famous case. It was from a World Cup a little while, or I don't know, a couple World Cups ago, where a journalist asked Neymar, like, have you ever faced racial discrimination in your career? And he said, why? Why would I? And the reporter said, because you're black. He said, I'm not black. Because in Brazil, he's not. But in America, he is.
Yeah.
But like, so there goes all of freaking woke politics, as far as I'm concerned. But I guess that's the nature of faith-based beliefs.
Well, that's the double bind that they're in right now with the Whoopi Goldberg thing too. They're in a double bind that she's actually regurgitating things from critical race studies and critical whiteness studies, and some average guy like John DeLynn, who kind of doesn't have a clue of what he or John Larson are regurgitating, might have heard Whoopi this week and said, "What is she saying? What is she talking about?" And they don't get that she's actually repeating some of the theory from.
If Whoopi had been talking history or Civilization of America 101
at Brown University,
at Brown, yeah. If that was part of her PhD dissertation, that's fine. She's spot on.
In fact, if she said otherwise, she would not be fine. So they're in that double bind, and then they're in the double bind that they fired other people for saying worse, like Roseanne or Gina Carano, and now they can't fire Whoopi because of the color of her skin. Before they happen, you can kind of imagine how the stuff will choke, and you just get left at watch. It's gonna choke. Watch, it's gonna choke. I can't tell you how it is, but it's gonna choke. And it's so funny because like the whole thing was coming off of people throwing a tantrum about that mouse book that conservatives removed from a curriculum, and then of course they call that like a book banning. But at the same time too, the conservatives were a bit overly doinky about that one.
That was also hideously misreported, of course, like always.
Because it's called it a ban. It was just removed from curriculum.
It used to be part of the standard curriculum for 8th grade. And what they said is, we're not going to make this part of the standard curriculum for 8th grade, but it's still in the library. And it is kind of dopey, but I don't know, like maybe Tennessee, what are we talking about? 13, 14-year-olds? Because have you read Mouse? It's excellent. It's incredible, but it's adult content,
Yeah, it's got hangings of children, and nudity,
it's
swear words, and
it's pretty brutal. But you're right, like they're in that double bind all the time.
What it takes to leave a high demand religion, it takes courage, it takes strength, it takes vulnerability, it takes integrity, it takes a certain level of intellect. And when I think about the average ex-Mormon that I am,
how did you get out? I feel a little bit mean about that.
Well, I'd say it takes courage. It's just a zinger. It takes all the same to stand up to the successor ideology luxury beliefs right now. I promise you that.
That's the thing, is I catch 100 billion trillion thousand times more shit and abuse from challenging wokies than I ever did from Mormons.
It's exactly half my life. It's
Yeah.
exactly half my life that I was Mormon, and then I had just like a little bit of a struggle getting out of Mormonism. Somebody might point at me and say, well, you had it easy or whatever, but I also kind of think he talks in this one a little bit about like he hit the lottery, like it was so easy for him. And I think that's one of those opposite world things that it's actually the minority that have those super difficult struggle situations with really crazy families. But we hear the stories of the nasty ones, but there's the first half of my life had one struggle of like, how do I tell people that I'm not going along with this game, or I'm just kind of doubting it or having trouble with it. And then the second half has all been, how do I tell these academic, oracles or whatever, and priestesses and believers and true believers that their emperor has no clothes. Like there's all sorts of nutty bonkiness in these theories but to say that Jonathan Streeter is going to be dropping a book review on that. And if I'm going to say there's anything that's brave, it's him being brave. He's the one who actually has a following in the ex-Mormon community, sees the stuff, sees what it is, and sees that there's a problem in actual critical thinking in it, and is daring to address it, even at the risk of what it might look like on his channel, where he knows there's true believers who are going to hear it,
Yeah.
So
I'm sure there's ex-Mormons that just leave the church. I'm sure there are some ex-Mormons that just leave the church, not to fulfill the stereotype, but there's probably some people who stop going to the church because they want to drink beer, or they want to goof around, or
I know a bunch of them, and that's not a problem. That's fine. If that's your reason for leaving the church, good, whatever.
they don't want to work hard. Like, I'm sure in theory, there's a few people out there that leave the church for those types of reasons.
I think those ones are probably, if I'm going to do some moral ranking again, those ones are better people on average than the ones who, or at least they're not getting, I like to call it like a autoimmune disorder. You're not going like full scrupulosity, getting pure puritanical. Great for them. It's better that you be that than you go and become some
What I experience is that the average person that comes to me is intelligent, strong, courageous, honest, and is heroic. Because I really think something that I think each of you who have left a high demand religion should do is literally pat yourselves on the back for doing something heroic. So if you have crossed that threshold into being the type of person that has the strength and the courage and the conviction to leave, you've already passed this threshold of quality of person that demands my respect.
Right
and,
on.
and that's just not theoretical. So
Is there not another direct contradiction there? It was like, well, I'm sure lots of people just leave and it's no problem. But the people who leave are courageous. And it's like, yeah, he just did. It's so weird.
But now
And
we're
there's
gonna
the whole thing where it's like, the people that come to me.
Yeah.
Really, John? Like, how does that work out statistically?
Well, and he gets self-aware.
Yeah.
He gets self-aware of it and says something about, now it's a bit culty to say that only my people are smart, so I don't want to say that I said that, but I said that.
But I did say that, and I obviously feel that.
So many ex-Mormons that I've met are just amazing human beings. They're not weak, they're not feeble, they're not quote sinners. They're strong, smart, courageous, capable, generous, kind, loving people. But for the most part, I have the most amazing community. And I have to be careful, because the sign of a cult is any group that sort of says that it's exceptional and better.
There you go.
It's not good enough to put out, but just for practice, I've made a little super cut of.
Yeah, well, that part's coming up too from Kara.
We're not special.
Right here.
We're special.
I'm not saying that ex-Mormons are better than Orthodox believing Mormons or the rest of the world. And I'm going to say it's a special thing to do what many of you have done. And so that's what makes me love. Maybe it's just that you're like me, but I don't think so. I think
You're
we're
not
amazing group of
special.
people
Just what you've done is special.
without being cultish and exceptionalistic. What do you think?
Yeah. Can I say something super bluntly?
Yeah.
It takes a certain type of person who recognizes that Mormonism is anti-intellectual. Right now, in the new year, we've started Sunday school lessons. We're talking about Adam and Eve. We're talking about a young earth. There is so many people who are sitting in church knowing full well that they are smarter than this, that what they're being taught at church it's bunk. It's not true. That Joseph Smith doubled down on ideas about Adam and Eve and all of these younger things. And there are so many people who are seeing that, like I did.
I agree that believing some literalist thing of that is trouble, but you also, it's been a big thing coming up recently because Jordan Peterson with Joe Rogan, he talked about how every single thing that we do in the Western world is done through the prism of the Bible. And of course, both sides of that hit. Like some Bible people said it like, yes, he's saying that he believes. And then the opposite side of it saying, what an idiot. He's such an idiot. It's not the Bible. And it took a pastor, like if you listen to Paul Vanderklay's videos on the past couple of days, February 2nd, February 3rd, the pastor to point out that he's not talking about that religiously. He's talking about it as like a foundational text of like the way you understand Dante is through the Bible, the way you understand Shakespeare is through the Bible, the way, and you got to know the Adam and Eve story to even understand Marvel. You know, it's just part of the Western canon, and it is a foundational part of the Western canon.
Yeah, whether we like it or not. Although I don't know why, like, to have an opinion on that is just extremely silly to me. Like John Lynn talks about, like, oh, when history makes you angry, and like, you know, that's the thing, like when people, their blood boils at history, where it's like, Jesus, what the hell's going on with your psychology?
Yeah, I think Mormons, even before like I ever heard Jonathan Pageau, who really talks about that stuff as a completely symbolic level, I think Mormons already kind of were a church that were a bit more symbolic about it than your average Bible belter.
Yeah, no, that's one of that whole thing about the Bible not being literal.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that makes Bible belief so much easier. It makes it, when you have that out, that's a nice out. And the Bible, I think that it's easier to derive value from it when you don't have to take it all literally, in my experience.
Literally or not, and deriving value or psychological value, or even just trying to understand what stories survive over generations and why that's important. But then it also informs so many other stories that kind of regurgitate the tropes.
But that's like, you know, that he was without sin, throw the first stone. That story is universally applicable.
Yeah, there's a lot of them in the Bible.
You don't have to accept anything supernatural to understand the value and the lesson.
When you were really out of this stuff, like you said the other time, that Kierkegaard quote that you gave, but when you're really out of the stuff is when you can play with it. Like go back and play with it and think about it. And
Oscar Wilde.
Was it Oscar Wilde? That's what it was.
Yeah, he says something like in a letter. He's like, I fear we have lost the ability to play gracefully with ideas.
And like when you drop all of the your held emotions and stuff, and this is, I already know what the postmodernist type person would start critiquing me about, like, only you're able to get so far outside of it because it's just a theoretical game for you type of stuff. And no, you can get it to, you're capable in this world of viewing things from a point of, how do they say it in the science world, that disinterested. And people hear that word and think disinterested means
uninterested.
Yeah. And no, you're just able to examine and listen and think about things from a different level than you used to, when you weren't sitting there thinking it was like some pressureful thing that you had to accept or didn't have to accept. And then you can play with the ideas knowing that it's up to you. You're free.
And you can be gentle.
And you can be gentle. And
you don't have to break anything. You don't have to smash anything over anybody's head. That's gracefully.
Somebody comes and pressures you and says, I can see getting frustrated with it or whatever, but you can take it for like what it's worth. There's always these sorts of people too who will get kind of mad, like, why didn't anybody ever come at me and try to get me back into the church? Do they not care about me?
I had that where like everyone's like, oh, I'm so tired of being pestered by my Mormon friends and family. I'm like, well, apparently they just happy to see me go.
Yeah. But if somebody even does kind of pressure me or put something on me, I can even like take their critiques, like, or as an atheist, like the Midnight Mormons on a recent podcast were saying atheism is only narcissism. And instead of sitting there stopping going, they affected my atheism because my atheism is my creed, I stopped and just went, yeah, man, I guess it kind of does like kind of change the dials and make you just think about the world from inside your own brain a bit more than you used to. And so maybe there's something to that. Maybe, maybe
Cardin does drive me nuts the way, like, he's just, because for me it's just like for me, I wish I could talk to Cardin and just say, like, no, for your sake, to make your arguments sharper, you need to tune how you use these words a little bit, because
I think he
overlaps atheism and wokeism and all this other stuff, and it's just like, well, no, you're goofing up there, because and like,
but still, some of that's for a faster heuristic too, and just being
I guess so, but I don't know, it's an easy fix. It's an easy fix, because like, I don't know, like, I've never gotten an answer to this. Every time somebody brings up why atheism, blah blah blah, like they talk about, like,
but to give the stereotype to it, I would say
to
them that on average, you're probably right. Most atheists go woke, not all, and I'd say it's like a standard deviation. It's not, but yeah, a bunch of them do go and turn their church into wokeness.
There's a lot there, but that's the thing though. It's like, that's not because of
Yeah,
or atheism, you know.
we're watching in the middle of it, and then part of the thing Kevin and I are starting to cover is that it's one of the things Midnight Mormons know, and they're critical of it, is the same problems are happening inside, outside. It's happening inside the church and outside the church. It's exactly
Yeah.
the same, and so it's something else that's playing on people's brains there.
But yeah, so I can't remember exactly how it plays, but in this episode, Kara says, "I don't believe I'm better," and that
It's
I'm
right here.
better.
Here we go.
Yeah, that's right.
For this atmosphere,
I'm
this
too good for
this
this.
confine that I've been put in, and it takes so
That's
much
right.
courage to say I actually am better. I've been told
Go
by
to-
this is where truth is. This is where I'll get to be with my family again. Whatever instinct I have that feels uncomfortable, whether it's being a woman or any other type of marginalized person that sits in church and says something feels off, it is so
A
difficult to say
woman or
I am better
any
than this
other
place.
type
Come hell or
of
high water, I have to leave. Come whatever
Get to 104. Get to 104.
may, whatever happens, I have to be authentic. That I'm better than this. And that's what I feel like a lot of Mormon Stories listeners are, that they're deconstructing a lot of things that they were told growing up, lies about themselves, lies about marginalized communities, lies about people who are not in the church, deconstructing lies in all of those arenas. That takes so much mental effort. And Mormon Stories listeners are the ones who say, sign me up. I want to listen to 9 hours of a podcast every single day. Like, Mormon Stories listeners are hardcore. They care, they're smart, they know that they were sold a lie and that they're better than it. So that's the most unnuanced take you'll get out of me for like a month. But I love you guys.
That's a nuanced one.
Yeah, I'm not saying we're better. I'm just saying we're better. It's really amazing. Like in one sense, like because like even if I give her all the principle of charity, we still basically end up with no. You directly contradicted yourself, Kara, and you should have started out by saying like I think that I am a better person in these ways, or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, I really think that she just thinks that she's better now, you know. And that's the thing is like because when I was a Mormon, I never felt like I was better than non-Mormons. I'm just gonna take a stab in the dark that Kara did, you know, and because like for one thing, I know that a lot of Mormon women, especially teenage girls, feel that way.
I would take a stab in this dark and say John DeLynn did too. And I'm sure that you and I were both people who, in our Mormon believing days, had actually had many non-believing friends and could interact and weave in and out with them and be fine. And we were just as able to be around Kevin too. We were just as able to be around our non-Mormon whatever friends. Like we weren't as insular as these people. And then these ones who were so insular, it's somewhat of that comes out and becomes the inverse thing.
One thing I thought was interesting is that when I was 18, my best friend in the whole world was raised in Utah, born and raised in Utah, non-religion. In fact, he's a direct descendant of William Clayton. But like his family had left the church, you know, generations before him. But I remember
my best friend, 16, 17, 18, like my main years of high school, he was an ex-Mormon, the guy I spent the most time around. And well, not an ex-Mormon, he was a non-Mormon. I think he was more like one of those people who might have gotten baptized when they were 8 or something, but they don't even know who baptized them or what that was about.
Yeah. But with my friend, I asked him like, how did the Mormons treat you as a non-Mormon? And he's like, they're fine. Like, sometimes they would assume I would say I was not Mormon, and they were fine. They gave me a Book of Mormon, and that was it. And what I thought was fascinating is that when I asked his little sister, who was like a year and a half younger than him, and I asked her, and I said, like, what was your experience as a non-Mormon? And she said, it was awful. They were horrible to me. Everything. And then, the thing is like, and I realized that my male friend was talking about his mostly male friends, and my female friend, his little sister, like was talking about the Mormon girls. So like, I think it depends. That's a 1-point data point, but it was really interesting. That's things like they went to the exact same schools, right? Same neighborhoods, same schools.
Oh, really?
But just on the gender basis, like his experience was like, the boys were all fine, and the girls' experience was the girls were all brutal about it.
Clicky,
yeah, and that it was very much that they, she talked about it. It's like,
social aggression.
You're a whore because you're not a Mormon,
Yeah. Well, in my school, I mean, I'm sure different people have different stories, and like the younger girls, I know more than a fact. If you heard Lindsay Hansen Park talk about it, I think she's even talked about it before, that she was definitely one of the prudish sides, but not that they couldn't have friends, but that were outside. But I think they did that. But I think there is some difference. Like the Midnight Mormons, all through that's the California Mormon, Quakers from Texas baptized later, Canadian Mormon. These guys are, I think John DeLynn was some sort of rural, and she's from Provo, but then lived outside of the state. You very rarely have somebody who was just a Salt Lake Mormon. And I think Salt Lake Mormonism was just such a different thing. Sure, there was the tight knit thing, but at the same time, we were all exposed to non-Mormonism in Salt Lake. It was 50-50 around here.
Yeah, for me growing up, pretty much.
Yeah, we don't want to make money, get rich off of thrusting people into a faith crisis. It would be the happiest day of our lives if no one had to go through a faith crisis anymore.
Yeah. Oh my
and
gosh.
we never had to care about this
Oh my
anymore.
gosh.
But it's unfortunately a problem the church created that we are here to pick up the pieces of.
Yeah.
That's just, I wanted to pass by that one. In that, I skipped by John Dehlin says he was abused. They get into a little bit about the person who they were making this video about, which I found out who it is, and that is a ball of wax that I don't want to get.
Oh, like who the critic they're actually responding to is?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, they don't say who it is. They just.
Well, I know they don't say it, but you're saying you know who it is.
Yeah, didn't I showed it to you? You might not have looked at it. I sent you a bunch of TikTok videos from it.
Those might have been attachment unavailables.
Well, I mean,
anyway, we'll have to get back. Yeah.
I'll say who it is. I don't care like that much. It's a guy named New Name Noah.
Oh.
And he's the guy who's been trying to like go and sneak into churches. He was the guy who tried to bring a porn star into the church.
I've never early on when everything I knew about New Name Noah was just that New Name Noah was the pseudonym of a guy who published the endowment ceremony. And at that time, my attitude was like, people shouldn't do this. You should not trespass. But so I felt like, it's good that somebody put this out there for informed consent. That was my attitude. The more I've learned about him,
he's out there and he's extreme on stuff, but at the same time too, some of his critiques here aren't all wrong.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
She talks about the stuff of her putting out a video of saying, what woman who's 32 and has a bunch of kids thinks I want to sleep with John Dehlin? And knowing like what the recent history is, like that is in bad taste. That is a little bit like, oh, we'll use who John Dehlin will always bring up. It's like Kavanaugh having some aide put out a TikTok video and that aide saying, oh, gee, this Kavanaugh guy, he threw me on the bed and groped me. And it's like, it's dense. It's maybe not, maybe not the best taste of a thing to do when the people really have kind of gone through being accused of such things. And he talked about that, and he talked about some other points, and then that blew up into a whole entire thing of everybody calling each other names about faces and looks and appearances, and then claiming that he hit on me, he hit me, and then he hit on me, and then he said a racist thing to me, and he, just how these things develop.
I think a polite term for New Name Noah would be provocateur.
Provocateur for sure.
To be kind, because I don't like his tactics very much.
So then they talk about at 116. They talked about emotional labor and how they don't get paid for any of that. And,
oh my God! This is the thing is I know it doesn't count because I'm a man, but what's my emotional labor worth for what I've suffered at the hands of wokeness? Anyway.
So then it goes into more stuff about we could be rich, we could be rich, and you guys are trying to pull us down like a bucket of crabs, and then
what? That's such a line of crabs. Go get rich and then spend your money on this.
Yeah, and then there's like a portion of they always kind of like take these little jabs like capitalism is bad, because that's just checking off boxes to sound right for their crowd. That's
I can't imagine they thought about it that hard.
You saw the argument I got into with somebody in the Latter-day Lobsters crowd about what neoliberalism is, and people just can't grasp what the concept is. Is that the concept is that it's corporate. It's just a way to profit off of your liberal sensibilities, this woke type stuff, and they've got to say capitalism bad so they can keep profiting. There's so much of that right now. To be able to keep capitalizing, you gotta slip in the conspicuous capitalism bad. The Nihilist podcast that Dehlin recommended did that, and
pursuing money is the root of all evil. By the way, we're a 501c3 doing a fundraiser to save America from Mormons.
I just had that thing this week that people in my band were, they're just kind of general guys, but they started saying stuff about oh, these capitalism and all back. And I say, every single one of our jobs is in the real estate market, and two of you
Or
are
investing.
landlords, and
Yeah, and you're
and it's
investors, and
just like you said, the commie is a landlord, and
yeah, yeah. It's
Okay.
okay. When I have to work within the system.
So that skipped us over an hour.
There's some level of
There's
prestige
still an hour and a half
I mean,
left of that.
or
yeah.
something
The last hour of it's crap, but there's no point left.
that would
They
make all of
do
this mental
repeat
anguish worth it.
themselves a lot.
Yeah.
Is there some price point that somebody else would want to put up with what John just said? I don't think so.
They're just saying people don't want this. Nobody wants this. They love this. It's what they want
Oh.
to do. They're afraid of getting taken away, but nobody wants this. You don't want this.
Yeah, like
You-
we're really providing a service.
You don't want to be a part of this. No, nobody knows what they're.
It's difficult.
Yeah. There's a really interesting Reddit post right now that basically is saying, it's basically another John DeLynn thread on Ex-Mormon Reddit that basically is saying, aren't you all disturbed at how like supportive John's listeners and fans can be? It's almost like John's the new cult leader, John's the new prophet, and his followers have now just accepted the new blind, following of John DeLynn as the cult
It's like
leader.
my biggest pet peeve, by the way.
What? Why?
When people say that.
Why is it a pet peeve?
I'll let you go first, then I'll say why.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I get it. Like, and I'll be like, I teach critical thinking skills and like anti-cult
No, you
critical
don't.
thinking intentionally because I
Those
don't
are words you use. You teach nothing.
want to be anyone's prophet. I don't have a dogma. I don't have a doctrine. I don't have a theology. I'm not telling people
Yes,
what
you
happens
do.
in the
Yes, you
afterlife.
do. Yes, you do.
I'm not taking people's wives and sexually, abusing their children or their spouses. Like I've
Not
got none of the
guilty.
trappings of
Not guilty. But they always do like a gish gallop with that stuff of like saying like, I didn't steal a car, kick over a kid, molest a cow, or eat your dinner. And and somebody's supposed to go like, wait, yes you did. And like, no, I did not. Like you just barely gave a list there of things, and there was one of them I kind of wanted to pull out of there.
There's some smoke there. Yeah.
a prophet. In terms
I know if I just say yes you do, people are going to immediately go to I'm calling you a cow raper. That's not the one I was pointing at. But you put it in a gish gallop list there. And
of like dogma, theology, heavy behavioral controls, heavy control of information, trying to manipulate people, like, trying to control their thought.
To the level I'd say, sure, I'd say then you got to extend that to the other side if they are or are not that extreme.
Yeah.
You can't, if it's true of you or not true of you, or true of them or not true of them, they're very, very upset and offended if they get called out for it or get somebody points it out on them, but then they do it in not the same level of rigor they're demanding to the people that they're pointing at either. It's just, I don't think Mormonism currently is a cult either. I think at one point in time you might have called it that. I think currently it's hit religion status and it acts like religion, and I've always kind of agreed. I even said it on the Midnight Mormons with the concept that like Mormon's not a cult, but maybe the time around being a missionary is like a little cultish, but the rest of it's pretty much just high demand religion defines it well enough.
Yeah.
That's abusing in all the different ways you can abuse. I'm just a dude who has got a microphone and a camera, who runs a nonprofit where people voluntarily contribute, and I'm creating some content. So there's kind of a egregiously gross false equivalence of like in any way saying you're just like the Mormon church. For one, what did you have? That's one.
It's all
It's
those
gross.
things. I mean,
It's
I'll hear every
gross
once in
for
a
us
while.
to do that. We're being gross. But also, I'm really curious. Like, so Mormonism, John DeLynn lists Mormonism as a high demand religion. I wonder if John DeLynn would say the following sentence: Islam is a high demand religion. You think the words could come out of his mouth? Or
not
would
without a preamble that he's not racist.
Oh yeah.
Let me give a 45-minute preamble that I know the relativism, racism relative in different people, and different points of views, and privilege, and the privilege of life in the first world and the third world and
Western standpoint epistemology.
That's what people didn't like get about that joke that the 4chan people played when they put up that sign that said Muslims write about women, that they're putting people in the same double bind that they're in. It's that same thing that they put out that post, those signs everywhere that said it's okay to be white. And it's putting people in the double bind. It's all these like little tricks of how to put people in the double bind if they don't know how to respond to that, because it's supposed to give you the cognitive dissonance of the two different worldviews that you're trying to hold. Well, let's watch John go through some more cognitive dissonance right here.
join cults all the time. And there are predators, and there are predators in this business. When I was in the first few years of this job, I found a guy that I just thought was amazing, and I started promoting him, and he turned out to be a predator. Like, I get it. And that's partly why people are cautious. And so I'm always torn.
I
Like,
wonder who he's talking
we'll get to this.
about.
Like, I hate the fact that I'm a straight white male and that I represent the patriarchy in many ways. But then again, should I not
Coming
try
around.
and make it
You know
better?
what?
Should I not try and
I've shit on John so much in our podcast. I'm going to say right now, John, it's perfectly okay with me that you're a straight white male and the patriarchy is not real. So let me absolve you. Let me absolve you.
Once
Fred.
again, we're saying turn a profit,
Yeah.
not from charity, just turn a profit.
Make
and
money.
You're okay being a straight white male. Just own that you want to tear the
Yeah.
thing down. And there you go. There's your product and there's your integrity.
And there goes our reason to do these podcasts.
Yeah. Oh, and maybe like at the same time too, like I'm fine with your politics too.
Yeah.
Just stop with the stopping and saying this
That
is
it's not
apolitical.
politics. Oh yeah. See, in everything we just said, we summarized liberal democracy,
Yeah.
pluralism,
The whole thing too is like
tolerance.
so much of these podcasters, they think that it's their epistemological job to go out there and free Mormons of their cognitive dissonance. And so that's all we're also doing too. We're trying to free of your cognitive dissonances. That
What's good for the goose,
yeah.
John DeLynn.
and move the needle with my privilege? And so it's always fraught. But I'll just say the second thing is
Move the needle with my privilege.
Move the needle with your privilege that you profit off of. That's the interest convergence that they're not okay with. Maybe you understand this, but you got to pretend like you don't understand this right now when you're doing the pitch.
is that do people really think I don't get eviscerated daily? Do they not think I'm not constantly inundated with criticism? Like, people sometimes go, John, you're so thin-skinned and you can't take.
Listen, that's also too. Well, I mean,
that's not us.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? Like, I am obliterated with criticism nonstop. Do you want to talk about the criticism in this job?
Oh,
like,
I mean, from not being able to please everyone, that's just like bare minimum. You already know that. But yeah, constant criticism that if I could say one thing on this entire long podcast, it would be the criticism John and I get for sharing a personal opinion, or somebody just on the podcast sharing an opinion or an experience of theirs that's true to their lived experience, but somebody listening to the podcast not being able to separate and differentiate that person sharing an opinion from themselves and needing to kind of like combat it and prove them wrong in the comment section because they don't have that same lived experience, instead of getting curious and the opposite of
they give a list of criticisms, which of course not all of them are easy criticisms, but
what is different between a person's lived experience and their experience? Just as a linguistic, like that phrase just bugs me linguistically.
Because one of them is an ideological claim by an oppressed group.
Oh, that's right. I don't have lived experiences because I'm not marginalized and I have.
You don't have lived experience.
That's right. I have privileged experience.
That's one of the claims that I see apologists glom onto and figure out how to use back at them. And they'll say stuff like, in my lived experience, I never saw people talk about Kolob. In my lived experience, and whenever they kind of reverse judo them on that stuff, especially if they're not well versed in where the lived experience stuff comes from, they'll just kind of sit there like deer in the headlights. Well, he just used a lived experience on me,
Yeah.
Hey, don't you dare cancel me or my husband. I swear to gosh over what I'm about to say. My husband is still, he's my best friend. I love him to death. He still has a very, very protective, you could call it patriarchal nature to him.
Why do you got a preamble that
my husband is such an asshole. He's concerned about my emotional and physical well-being.
There's no orthodoxies here, John Larson. There's no orthodoxies. There's
my
no
husband uses his white straight privilege to care about and love me.
John Larson will so frequently like pop out and say stuff that he thinks is like saying that's my wife is sexist enough for him to like throw a fit about. And this is the exact same thing here. And then I try to talk to him and say, you have an orthodoxy. What orthodoxies? There's no orthodoxies here. All your orthodoxies are in all your preambles. It's all in the preamble.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff I've skipped over is she talks about she got made fun of for her nose.
I do kind of wonder, just as like a film thing, because her nose is crooked to one side, and I kind of wonder, because I know, like, for example, like Stephen Fry has a very famously crooked nose, and like I think you notice that they kind of will try to angle the camera and stuff. kind of make that work to her favor, because like, you know, if it's crooked
Like
to one side, you want to aim it
Owen
that
Wilson.
way, because
Yeah.
the other way it exaggerates the crook. I
Mm.
think, yeah, because I mean, and we know that Kara thinks, and this isn't a criticism, by the way. This is like I said, I'm just nerd about film and video, but you know, because we know Kara's concerned to some degree, because she talks about spray tanning, and obviously she dyes or blondes or whatever it is. So yeah, like just stressing, not a criticism, just kind of wondering, does she always sit at that angle because of the crooked nose? Anyway,
Likely, I'm sure she's aware of it and all that stuff. But
I
at the
have
same time,
crooked
too, like,
head.
yeah, well, I wouldn't be embarrassed if I was her at all. I don't think she looks bad at all. But I think it was the new name Noah. Well, no, I think she said it was somebody else who started coming at her, and then she kind of brags that she and her friends doxed him, like, haha, we got you. But whatever, you know.
He was doxed a million years ago.
Not new name
Mike-
Noah. The one who
Mike
called
No-
her
oh.
nose thing was a different person.
Oh, yeah, Mike Norton. Yeah, that's the name.
Yeah.
About him, like he is tough as nails.
Yeah. Well, I try to be. And now I'm going to talk about something.
That's a
on my end,
patriarchal construct to be tough as nails.
really brief. I've tried to address this before, but I'm gonna go ahead and address it again. In my world, it's not being accused. Sometimes they criticize my appearance. I'm often, criticized for talking too much in my interviews. I try and control that, but it's hard because people also give me the feedback that they like my input. I'm criticized for how long the podcasts are, but then again, I have people saying that's what they love about the podcasts. Like, I'm criticized a lot. I want your feedback. I want, to speak directly to that Reddit thread where they're like, John, you're just another cult leader. I'm just going to say right now, I want constructive feedback.
the constructive category really makes that limiting.
Yeah.
Let's see. He talks about that he's worried that because all these people are saying this stuff about him, that there's guilt by association. And once again, I say the new name Noah guy is not just completely out of his mind. That when John gives this list of stuff, he says, I haven't rape, harassment, hurting kids, harming kids, raping kids, zero. There's been zero of it. And the new name Noah guy and some of the stuff made the point, and he's saying, John, there's not been zero. You're making once again, that list there, that's hard to pick the one thing out. But yes, the harassment claims have been made. That's one of the things that is it guilty or not guilty, but there have been harassment claims, and there has been like a level of admittance to extramarital affairs in the workplace, which that alone already is the troublesome part. And I've listened to the Radio Free Mormon excuses for the whole entire thing, and as an HR director, I found some problems in that area, but some of them don't exactly matter as much.
CEO of CNN just had to resign over exactly that.
Yeah, and they mentioned in that RFM podcast that one of the reasons why it didn't go to the EEOC is because you're not a company of 15 people, and they have these lawyers just baffled about what is a commission? What is a commission? And so if you have lawyers talking about that, you're not really talking to experts about this stuff, because they should know what an EEOC commission is. And the EEOC commission, like there's something called like the Lilly Ledbetter law in wage commission. And if it goes over 180 days, even if you have the best claim in the world, it's just too late. And those places hold to those types of things. And an organization has to have over 15 people to be reviewed for the EEOC. And then they frame that as if that is a sign because she withdrew her complaint from the EEOC.
That it was an invalid complaint.
That it was an invalid complaint, and you're being disingenuous when you do that and show that.
Everybody, we know.
And they mentioned they hinted that there's 15 people in that, but they are really kind of just it's the same type of thing that happens when these news organizations lately have been trying to point at when people plead the fifth, that probably means they're guilty. And it was brought up in the Rittenhouse trial that the lawyer is not supposed to bring that up to the jury because you're weighting things a certain way. And beyond that too, there's some level of like, if you're just having relations with people who at your job, it's questionable if you can really call it like harassment or not, if it's fully consensual or not. But then a termination afterwards because it ended, that could be a retaliation. There's all sorts of stuff it's not something that I would go around blasting from the tops of my lungs that it came out a big fat goose egg. That's just how I would put it. And I also wouldn't say it's not a big fat goose egg that you did or didn't do something. It's just that there's admittance from your part that there was relations beyond a professional relationship and it affected her job. That alone is the claim. That alone is the issue.
Yeah.
And that alone seems to have happened when we were there. If it matters jurisdictionally is the question mark that's in there.
Yeah.
But
He admitted to what exactly? An emotional
we don't know.
affair?
We just know that they're admitted to.
Like I thought he made a public statement saying it was an emotional something. I don't know.
It was more than a working relationship. And then they admit right in that RFM podcast that she basically lost opportunities. That's part of the things that are looked at when somebody's job's negatively affected. She lost opportunities, and then also they removed her from the job, and they removed him from the job and put him back in. Like, we're removing you as the CEO and then hiring you as a contractor. That's a maneuver too.
Yeah.
And so it's just at a level that, like, I think that you're being deceptive if you turn around. Like, I still hold by my other thing. Like, it's not guilty. Like, we don't know for sure what happened. She claims that there was some sexual stuff, but not all the way sexual, but it might have just been emotional stuff or whatever. But still, like, the work actions, what happened in the work actions, that stuff was not smooth. It's not a zero.
Yeah.
You know?
And also, like, just I don't know, the whole structure, the 501c3 thing, like, nobody buys it, John. You're in charge. Like, these people work for you. You're not a contract employee. This is all, legal framework, but yeah, it's just silly the way you're like, oh, I'm just an employee. Yeah.
So I talk about that because they bring up the RFM thing like it's a complete exoneration and all that sorts of stuff. And it's the same way that they talk about part of the deal of not guilty. Even if I give you a not guilty is also not an exoneration. It's also not saying that the other lady was crazy for bringing up a complaint. She may have had a complaint and may still have had a complaint, especially if you had more than 15 people. But she doesn't have a complaint.
And until John apologizes, we get to keep bringing up how he reacted to the Kavanaugh accusations.
Yeah, he even mentions in this, I'm on the right side of being against all these other guys.
Those types of accusations levied against them. And fortunately, I've been able to still have a significant impact in spite of all the lies and the smears. But I
impact
think
on your bank account.
By the skin of my teeth, and frankly, it's a credit to my supporters and my listeners and my friends and my fans and my donors who either have not heard these things or they have enough critical thinking skills to require evidence before they believe.
Like you require it, right, John? Like you require it. Oh my gosh, this is the stuff. Like, I'm telling you,
But it's too bad that you published that, John. It's too bad you published your thoughts on the Kavanaugh thing.
This is right inside of the whole angle. It was the moment where I was like, done. It was the moment that I was done with the whole Democratic Party and said, anybody who's sitting on this whole entire thing, I could not, even if you're the right person in anything, I would not vote for any one of you ever again.
Yeah, no, that's basically that. We're like,
because you're smear merchants.
Yeah, like, I mean, my standard is like, it's tough. I can't really vote because people say, well, you don't vote, and I'm like, well, no, I vote for everybody that I think represents me. It's just that nobody who represents me will run. But I'm also at the point now where it's like, I don't care how much I'm on your side with whatever you're saying. If you are willing to align yourself with Republicans or Democrats, for me, that shows me that you are not principled, because you can't pretend to be on the side of due process and principles and align yourself with either political party, as far as I'm concerned.
And this is because they all double back on like a principle, but
they're all proud of it. And everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they lie about it, everybody knows. I mean, like, there's a billion, trillion, zillion examples, but like, just one, for example, was that whatever it was way back when, when it was a Democrat president in charge and they wanted to get to seat a conservative on the Supreme Court, and they dragged their feet, and then you switch the parties and everybody's opinion switches.
Every single ex-Mormon out there, because this is the vast majority of them, every single one of them who wants to go back to the part where these guys are talking about, like, you have a higher intellect and you see through things so much better. Like, if you're some people who still buy hook, line, and sinker stuff coming out of like CNN and MSNBC and the Democratic Party because they're just the right side because that's who the luxury belief people say are the right side. No, you didn't graduate. No, you didn't beat it. No, your intellect didn't win. They're just so obviously see-through. For me, the Republican Party proper, that was like the easy one to deconstruct way back, or to use
Yeah.
that word, but way back during like the war era and the Bush era and the Cheney era, all who are now part of the Democratic Party, which you should stop and pay attention to. If you're sitting there holding on to that, like that's your church, you didn't win. You didn't get out. You didn't beat it. You're in the same thing. You're doing the same thing. You're going along with the crowd because you're afraid of what the crowd will say about you if you leave it, and you're refusing to stop and look at how much they lie.
Yeah, and then you participate in the lies, you participate in the false versions of history and the weird racist conspiracy theories, all of the things that, like, for all the reasons that these guys say, like, well, like, it doesn't matter how much you denounce the racism of Mormonism, as long as you remain a Mormon, then you are participating in racism. It's like, well, that's exactly, it's more true of the Democratic Party than the Mormons, because the Mormons have, as an official stance, denounced racism, whereas the Democratic Party today has embraced it wholeheartedly. But
there's part of the thing that I showed on that one Dylan podcast of calling Dylan not guilty,
yeah,
is that there was one of the other of his posts where he said, "Gee Williker, guys, I never really thought about this, but maybe we should have been harder on Bill Clinton." And I remember, like, I don't want to say I'm better than you, Kara and John or whatever, but like, didn't anybody with half a brain see through Bill Clinton in 1997, 98? Like, what? Like, I remember watching that stuff live and just having my jaw drop. I hadn't even been on a mission yet, Like,
yeah.
like what were people holding on to with Bill Clinton? That's even before I knew, like, just how raucous the claims got against him. But
Yeah, he got a pass, didn't he? Like, he's still allowed to
unbelievable. But the as James Lindsay will say, is the disparate treatment is the message.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Let's see here. We're doing pretty darn good. We're almost there.
Yeah, and we're getting to 2 hours too.
And I love the saying that I learned dealing with the religion: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I just hope
the extraordinary evidence that you wait for when you go and put out stuff about people in the church who have a claim against them.
Yeah.
And you just put it up on your podcast.
What about the extraordinary claim that somebody can be born into the wrong body? That's an extraordinary claim. I'd like to see some extraordinary evidence.
Judith Butler wrote a lot of words.
Oh,
here's any of these claims against me, we'll just ask for evidence. And I'm not saying there aren't mistakes I've made. There's stuff that I've been willing to put out there to address many of the accusations against me. Go read everything. Go to the Mormonism Live episode that Bill Reel and Radio Free Mormon did, where they addressed smears and allegations against me. We can even put that in the show notes. I'm happy for people to go do that. Read the stuff that I put out there to address the smears, but please don't believe the smears without evidence. And if I tell you this all the time, Kara, if I steal money, if I abuse or assault you, I want you to tell people.
Yeah.
Take me down. Take me down. If I assault or rape or steal or abuse or
not
embezzle,
laugh at one of my jokes.
Or if I don't laugh at one of your jokes, take me down. And I mean that. Take me down. I don't deserve to be in this platform if I'm assaulting, abusing, raping, and stealing. And I haven't. And that's why I've been able to survive this job. I hope that
Let me see.
I did it by not raping.
And
there's that pendulette thing, like, I rape exactly the amount of people I want to.
I have raped every single person I've ever wanted to rape. None.
I'm also going to say that if you consider yourself an advocate for victims, levying egregious false accusations against people with no evidence does not help your cause. It doesn't help.
If you consider yourself an advocate for victims, like that just that construct there, where it's like, what, as opposed to what, the people who are like, fuck victims. like it's like,
well, that's what they act like if you demand evidence that you are.
If we went outside, did man on the street interviews, are you an advocate for victims?
He doesn't. He knows and has to know that if the luxury class or whatever, the successor class, whatever we call them, demand that we suddenly all believe that this person is guilty of something without evidence, that we are called alt-right Nazis if we go demanding evidence. I experienced that for 5 years, John DeLynn. Like 5 straight years of saying, what is the evidence of this? And there being none, getting called an alt-right Nazi for that.
I got chased and cyberbullied on feminist Mormon housewives for defending John DeLynne's right to due process.
Yep. And we all got called that for saying, what's the evidence of this Russia thing? Where's
Yeah.
the evidence? We all got called that for saying, let's review this evidence, supposed evidence of this Kavanaugh thing. And it was a joke of a laugh of thoughts from 30 years ago with zero corroborations for something that you supposedly, this is one of the things about the Kavanaugh thing that nobody ever like stopped and talked about. From what everybody says, who nobody remembered anything and nobody think, I don't think it ever happened. There's no way to prove. There's no even idea this sort of happened. But here's the other flip end of it. The whole situation might have happened and not been what she remembered. Nobody ever once thought well, maybe she was at a party with these guys and these guys were joking around and laughing and she bumped and knocked into him. And if we all had a camera view of the situation and we saw with that camera view that didn't go down exactly like, even she may be, even though I think it's complete lies because she got caught in so many other lies, the lies about not flying, lies about having to create an extra entrance into her house because she suffered PTSD from it. She had a bunch of different lies that got exposed. And then the fact that she couldn't remember where it was, none of her friends would back her up who were supposedly going to back her up on it. But
well, I mean, that was really damning, is where, because the investigators say, can anybody corroborate this? She says yes. She gives a name. The investigators went to that person. They said, can you corroborate this? She said, no, I cannot.
Can't even corroborate that we met the guy. And beyond all of that, they had the special investigator lady sit and listen to all of it. Her review of it was, this isn't even enough to start a claim. It's not even the start of a claim. It's not anything. This isn't anything to start on. And we just had the biggest circus in our whole entire country. And John DeLynne decided that he was guilty because he got belligerent. You never get belligerent about getting accused about stuff, do you, John DeLynne?
Yeah.
But the whole entire thing that happened with that scenario that drove me so crazy with it is that it could have happened and just not been at all what she remembers it as, because she described getting knocked on a bed and fondled a bit. Like, they could have been drunk kids. We could all watch the video of it, and it could have been that he bumped and ran into her, tumbled into her, and fell on her on accident.
Yeah.
And then when getting up, she thought he touched her in some way, and then he didn't mean to touch her. Like, the whole thing could have happened, and it still have not been the thing and that's what's true of like a lot of these gray area things. I say a lot of them are gray areas. A lot of those gray area things aren't necessarily one person's lying, one person's telling the truth. A lot of those gray area things are misunderstandings.
Yeah, absolutely. But none of that applies here. Although, so about Rose, or well, that's not Rosebud, I guess we can say. I don't know. I don't even remember her name, and we might need to edit this out. But did you say that what's it called? Recovered memories had anything to do with that?
No, it was
that was somebody else.
It was something similar. It was a forensic interview. And
well, that's
the
different.
way they try to do with a forensic interview is they want to try to, you have a he said, she said situation. Forensic interview is trying to claim something so valid because we pulled it out from the scientific method that it's no longer he said, she said. The she said is for sure real because, so that's the pseudoscience of that. It's still just he said, she said. But
if it's recovered memory, that for me is just like, okay, well, that's not evidence.
It's forensic.
You have to throw that out immediately.
The pseudoscience of that is that you're trying to make somebody's one-sided opinion concrete.
Yeah. Well, so I listened to the forensic interview, and I came away from it thinking, I don't know. That's what I came away with. It was could be, could not. Like,
you land on the not guilty. Like, I don't know for sure, but except the one thing that's guilty is that he admitted to on his side that there was some relationship there, and they were coworkers, and he was her boss. And in my world of HR, that's already just a problem.
Like, when I listen to that interview, there's basically an entire spectrum of possibilities that remain on the basis of that interview.
And then
that's all I get.
Where the new name Noah guy, provocateur or not, where he is correct, even if people say that he went and was abusive to people on TikTok with the way he interacted with them or whatever, he's not wrong to say that Kara kind of making those jokes about being a 32-year-old woman with kids at the podcast, getting down with her boss John DeLynne, is a bit ill thought. Joking, it just is. Like I said, it's just the same thing as like if Kavanaugh had some some new worker with him, and that new worker woman is going to say, I'm going to put out some TikTok videos, and puts out some TikToks of, oh no, Kavanaugh just raped me.
Yeah, no, and the left believes wholeheartedly in severely punishing people who make tasteless jokes, like Roseanne Barr.
Oh yeah.
Is there any footage or recording of Cara Burrell's stand-up act?
Well, she did stand up at that most recent Thrive. I'm sure that's around somewhere.
Oh, that doesn't count if she's already working for Thrive. I just kind of wonder, like, what her comedy was like.
She might have had it on her own TikTok channel, which I think is funny. Her TikTok channel is called Nuance Ho, which is obviously a ripoff of Nuance Bro. And Nuance Bro is a great channel. Go check him out. He's a very nuanced, real nuanced thinker, and he goes over stuff. Like I said, this week he had a video about the violent crimes that have been going around against Asian people. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Levy egregiously false and defamatory, unsubstantiated accusations against people, because what it does is, once your accusations have been shown to be specious and ill-founded and fraudulent, it just makes a lot of people less interested later in believing actual credible victims. So don't pretend.
You don't say.
It's because I don't know if I get to it, but he has the whole other thing. I think it is right here, but he goes right back into the thing of the best stance to take is to first believe victims and all that sorts of stuff. And it's just people, adults should be capable of believing in not, taking the null hypothesis. That's my whole argument. The other thing, you're not disbelieving people by saying, I've got to verify this thing because you're making a strong claim. It's not saying I disbelieve you. And there's been so much. I remember I watched this, I think I sent you clips of it. I don't remember what it was, but it was just a real crappy cop show on Netflix. And the whole entire crappy cop show is this girl had this outlandish story that she'd been raped, and the cop didn't believe it. And he wasn't even like angrily not believing it. He just didn't believe it. He just said, I've got to verify it. So he goes and does like this whole investigation and verifies it. And at the end, he finds out that it's true. And that's not even the point of the story. The whole point of the story is at the end of the show, he goes crawling to the girl, crying to her, saying, I should have believed you from the start. The cop who figured the whole thing out, the cop who do research the evidence, the cop who did everything. And then the whole final bit of it is a speech of, be better. You should be, using that same typical line, using that exact slogan. You need to be better. So like the whole thing was to chastise that liberal cop who did everything in the correct, evidence-based, disinterested way. And it's just another one of the 10,000 different things where they throw in slogans and shitty movies and shitty TV shows that are just as bad as God is not dead for the Christians, just full of the message. The message must be put out, and just full of these knock you on the head idiot ideas. I watched this other one from HBO. I'm ranting here, but it's called The Night Of. And you think it's like this whole murder mystery about this kid going to prison, and it's like the night of, the stuff didn't happen. You're thinking like, who did it? Who did it? Who done it? Who did it? Who did it? And then he just falls into drugs when he goes into the prison, and then nothing ever happens of the murder. And by the end of it, the whole thing is just like a political commentary on getting into prison makes you fall into drugs. And
that's them did it to him.
Why did I just watch that? It's like 8 episodes, got Don Turturro and everything, and it's still just like, well, you told me the message, and I'm gonna forget this, except for to remember shows about the message in the future. And
and it's like, because like we were talking earlier about Star Trek, and like especially like original series, but also Next Generation, like they were very moralistic.
Oh yeah.
But they mostly taught, liberal principles. Whereas like when these like this, like you just say, like, oh, the lesson is don't do a proper and thorough investigation. Step on civil rights if a woman tells you to. Like no, bad message. This is a bad message. We know what happens when we just #believe women, because like, for example, many of the accusers at the Salem witch trials were women. It's an article of faith for them that basically that everything police do is just for oppression, and like there's nothing about why police do what they do that's built on centuries of experience.
But I'll call them in 2 seconds whenever I need them every single time.
If you're going to levy irresponsible.
It's just like everything we're putting, it's just so full of like this last little bit, these last little clips is just more cognitive dissonance when these guys are the kings of teaching us how to not have cognitive dissonance.
Fraudulent accusations and falsely accuse people for being predators when they're not.
Yeah, the hard pill to swallow, but it's true.
Okay, well,
And here's the truth of it too, is there's going to be the other side of that in that moment, just for him even saying that, he will get attacked by the psycho leftists, even though he's in no way good at being a real liberal.
we covered.
Do you think we
maybe
could
a lot.
crowdsource if we threw enough money at him that we could get John DeLynn to have Kate Kelly back on to talk about all that?
Well, I know Kate Kelly just wants to address him about making the money and his interest conversions and his white male toxic patriarchy, which that's his last little bit of lashing that he does to himself here. That we're getting
more of the stuff that we wanted to cover later, but let's just go ahead and cover just a few more things really quickly. One of the things that I'll touch on really briefly, I've already talked about this. I hate the fact that I represent the problem. Like, one of the biggest problems is patriarchy, right?
No, it's not.
White, straight, privileged, cisgender males who also can be sometimes charismatic influences in the community, like dominating. That's what, like, my face, my life, my body represents.
I hate that I'm straight. Fix it.
Well, also this is part of it too. Is like we're in the week where that Peter Dinklage thing came out, where he's throwing a tantrum that Snow White and Seven Dwarfs.
He got seven hardworking dwarf actors.
That's exactly it. Is like he's
Fired.
pulling up the ladders, and one of my favorite bands of all time will pay homage to all this stuff. Wilco, and they'll always say, "We have enough white men bands, and we don't need any more no bands because you're enough, right? You got in." You got in and you got noticed, and now you can pull the ladder up. Peter Dinklage and
you can
Jeff
be the flagship of Americana music,
or John Larson. Like, there's such a level of like one of the reasons it plays to their luxury beliefs is you also get to pull the ladder up. Like, I'm the last one who got to make money off of this. Like, no more white males because was enough. You know,
he did. He did hire, because that's the other thing, is like these people talk about tokenism, Mexican, and they're so into tokenism.
That's what he talks about it right here.
I'm coming out of Mormonism, harmed by the patriarchy, disrespectful of the patriarchy.
Well, he keeps
how did that patriarchy harm him? How did that work? You're part of the patriarchy and it harmed you.
You've talked about that so much about how that's a construct of. I know you've taken it to some feminists in the real life of like, tell me how the patriarchy isn't just Satanism or some sort of a religious construct.
No, like, really, you can, like, feminists using the word patriarchy. You can just imagine Nazis and using the word Zionism. Basically, we could really, literally, and people have done this. You can literally just interchange just a couple of the words, and the sentences, their meaning remains entirely intact.
And I'll throw an entire discipline under the bus that also throws DeLynn here. The American Psychological Association starting to pick it up and buy it up and talk about it.
Wanting to tear the patriarchy down, and I represent it. I'm white, I'm straight, I'm privileged, and I'm a man. And I hate that irony.
I am white, straight, and a man. Other things, yeah.
The way you get past it is you announce it, and then you're past it, and then you make sure no others have any chance like you, because you got the chance, and since John DeLynn got the chance, we're not individualists, we're groups. So me and Flip are very, very happy for white men that John DeLynn got the chance. Like, I'm very happy for white men that Jeff Tweedy got a lot of money. Like, that's
just like just this whole thing where he's like, he keeps saying, like, I hate that I'm these things.
Yeah.
Then give away all your money, stop talking, transfer your entire 501c3 over to somebody who's not all of the horrible things you are, and get out.
No, I'll just go ahead and keep making money, and then make sure no other white males are ever allowed in the space, because
you can't tell me that you hate this when you're doing it, and you don't have to. This is 100%
I can make the money
voluntary.
for the group. It's okay for me to make,
But I hate that it's me. No, you don't. You liar.
But once again, to get that donate button smashed, you gotta do the lashings.
Yeah.
Because there is this idea of pass the mic, create space for the people of color, the women, the sexual minorities.
Create space that you get paid for.
All the disenfranchised, vulnerable minorities. Yes, pass the mic. But I don't know. have I been able to help move the needle? Have I been able to advocate for LGBT people?
Move
Made
the needle
money.
from what to what?
You
Like
made
what's
money.
what? Like 'cause he says, like move the needle. Okay, so like
The end of history,
like
man. The eye at the end of history.
oh,
That's
'cause, like-
watching John DeLynn and
because he said earlier that he doesn't have like particular goals about where society's supposed to end up, or
No.
the church anyway. But he's
no,
moving the
there's no
needle.
utopia.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Imperfectly, have I tried to advocate for feminism and women? I've tried. I've done my best. Have I tried to speak out against racism? Use my privilege to help educate and
And interest convergence, make the money off of it.
This is one of the things that the woke do that's so stupid, where they act like, watch me speak out against racism. Racism is stupid and wrong. Like,
Bum, bum, bum.
like, I didn't have to cry. There was no emotional labor. like there you is. I spoke out against it. And then also, like, I mean, I don't need to speak out for feminism because it's an evil supremacist faith ideology, but it also takes no effort. It's not hard to be a wicked feminist. It's the easiest thing in the world. Just be super cynical and hate men. Easy.
Yeah, well, you didn't talk about racism in the right way either. You're talking
Oh.
about it in the colorblind way. Just this week.
What was the ADL? The ADL's new racism?
Yeah, I should pull that up.
It
but,
literally just says that white people are racist.
yeah, only white people can be racist, which
Yeah.
once again makes Whoopi Goldberg correct.
bring people to becoming more sensitive and supportive of marginalized groups. I've really tried. And so I hate the fact that I represent all the problems, and that by creating a nonprofit where I'm the head of it, in some ways I've recreated a patriarchy. And so I've tried to atone for that, or compensate for that, by having tons of people of color on the podcast, tons of sexual minorities.
And you make money off of all of it. You appease your demographic. You please your crowd with that. It's all just more interest
and you
conversion.
ease your guilty conscience.
Now you make the point there of like the Derek Bell thing, because one of my angles that I always try to take to describe to people about where the postmodern ideas, or even these new critical fill in the blank theories are usually wrong, isn't that like they don't have some good ideas. It's just that they're eternally unfalsifiable. So like it's there in every situation at all times. But if they could actually be liberal about it and base stuff off of evidence, there's some good ideas in there. Like interest convergence is a great idea, but you need to also implement evidence-based ways of coming across what Derek Bell's concept of interest convergence is. It's universal, ubiquitous. It's the only reason whites would ever give up any power to any blacks is an interest convergence.
Yeah, and boy, the psychological projection there.
Yeah. Well, it's a confession on his own part too. But the idea of it, if you could be liberal and do it based off of evidence, the concept of John DeLynn and John Larson making money off of the message and the thing, and that they do it better than the people who are actually of those supposed classes, looks a little bit like interest convergence. You're using the entire Democratic Party, like interest convergence is true of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, absolutely. Kamala
Tons
Harris.
of women, and to even empower people like Gina Colvin and Natasha Helfer Parker and lots of other people to start their own podcasts in our network.
Oh, they needed
so
a
that we
man to empower them.
can pass the
It
mic.
took a straight white man to give them power.
I'm just always struck by how difficult it is to sort of like empower and advocate for marginalized communities, and then to be everything that was the problem that got us into this mess.
Because you don't
No,
get
it's
it.
not hard. It's the cognitive bias. The difficulty is the cognitive bias you are experiencing. That's the hard part.
And you
The
don't
part
get
where
that
you
in
re-
those theories,
yeah.
that it's just true. Like Flip said, is the truth is you are out. Decenter yourself. That's the answer.
Yeah.
You know?
You can have your wish, John. You can have everything you say you want.
You need to be
Just stop.
removed, and a black female Supreme Court justice needs to be put in your place.
Yeah.
Go watch this movie Ed Wood and this movie called Glenn Glenda, and maybe we can talk into.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Maybe
how to
wear cashmere
elegantly
on your next episode.
navigate that sometimes, and it sometimes makes me hate who I am.
Well, I guess there's the easier way. You just come out as a demisexual, like his daughters, and
Or
I'm
an
only
asexual.
attracted.
Wait, is she a demi-ace?
One of them's a demisexual, the other one's an asexual. So they're both part of the LGBT community or whatever it is, but they're both normal girls. with just those new definitions of things that get you to be part of the queer community.
Yeah, I felt so good. A young person at work, like a 25-year-old, just without any prompting from me whatsoever, just scoffed at that whole idea about, oh, I have to call myself a demisexual. Like, no, that's just a typical. Frankly, I think it's pretty healthy.
From my liberal perspective, again, I think that the answer is for these really, really, really stupid ideas that John Dehlin pays homage to, and he doesn't even really know fully what he's paying homage to, is you should go read it. As like everybody who is an authoritarian, illiberal idiot, they say that the answer is don't go read those guys, don't listen to those guys, don't. To me, the people who I think are the absolute dipshits running stuff over, what everyone should do is go read it. Go actually read it. Go read what they actually say. Go read the thing that I dislike the most. Go read it.
Yeah. It's the dead opposite of their tactic.
It makes me want to
No.
just
Because under the liberal Enlightenment idea is the best ideas win out, whereas theirs is all nope. That's just a power game. That's just a power struggle.
disappear and go silent. But I don't know. Would Mormonism, would post-Mormonism be better off if I just disappeared and went away because I'm a white straight male?
It wouldn't.
I don't like
Nothing
any
would
of
change.
that.
Nothing
No,
would change.
We come from a religion, like you said, that has a lot of patriarchal structure to it, that has a lot of white supremacy in its history all the way up till today. And I understand what you're saying, but I think with all of that being said, John, you've done the best job possible to pass the mic. And
How did my white Mormon great-great-grandpa, steeped in all of that Mormon white supremacy, write that poem lamenting how the whites treated Native Americans? How the hell did that happen, Kara?
Nobody noticed them until nobody noticed that they were people until HBO taught me in 2019, or I learned from Netflix.
He got the lessons about polygamy. He got the lessons about the Book of Mormon, but the lesson about the white supremacy, I guess he missed that day at church, and like a bad Mormon went off and wrote a poem about how white people should treat the Indians like they're human. Strange.
feeling like, I don't know, maybe like a PTSD reaction of seeing you mimic all of these characteristics of the church that they just came from. I have empathy and I have space for them, but it should never discount the good work of everything that we just said that you've put your livelihood and your life on the line to do. And I think you've done everything that you could do.
Well, thank you.
I don't like the way she uses the
asking-
words empathy and space. It's like they have different meanings than they do to me.
Yep.
That's because they do have different
It
meanings.
is those double meaning things.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not fishing for compliments.
I'm
It
giving you
can't be
anyway.
Like, it can't be like, oh, poor straight white privileged male now is like saying
White people
we
have
believe-
feelings too. People
Well-
in privilege have feelings too. Everything in
We know what you're doing, John. You're giving yourselves the lashings to give yourself approval to continue doing what you're just going to continue doing.
It's just like, I
Context.
mean, it's funny, like, again, about how it's just church all over again. Because, you know, one of the things that as ex-Mormons we always bring up about in church, and because it's like, you know, from inside it's perfectly normal, but from the outside, that thing where if men get up in church, they have to say something extremely complimentary about their spouse and something very self-deprecating about themselves. It's almost formulaic.
Yep. And it's been formulaic in TV and movies for the past 40, 50 years. I mean, I think I was talking to you about it and pointing it out, and you noticed it too in the 2000s. Like, look, every single comedy is dumb oaf husband, and that's the only joke.
Yeah.
The only in the 2000s, in the 1990s, it was already there. It's Simpsons, Married with Children,
Yeah.
Tim
The
the Two
difference
Man
is, like,
Taylor.
Because The Simpsons, I noticed, like, you know, there's, especially in those first 10 seasons, there's a lot of jokes where, you know, Homer says something dumb, Marge or Lisa has the rational, reasonable reaction, you know. But the reason why those shows are good and they don't suck is that Homer is always redeemed in the end, and Marge and Lisa have foibles too. But by the 2000s, that part was gone. The part where the male is redeemed and is still okay, and we love him, and it's okay for him to be who he is, and the part where women can also have foibles, that's gone.
Yep. There's only the as Nerdrotic calls it, there's only the hero's journey now. She can't go from like foibles to getting better. She can only be great and perfect, and she just needs to realize that she's great and perfect.
Yeah. Whereas, like, I just watched that episode when the one where Marge has a gambling problem, and it ends with Homer basically just enjoying that for once he gets to turn the tables and saying, "You have a gambling problem."
Yeah. But if you really stop and look at it, like look at what most of the whole entire things of all those different movies, the superhero movies have gone through, the upside down thing that Pajal will call it, and it is the hero's journey. Think of Wonder Woman, think of Captain Marvel, even think of it's even in things that seem okay. They were kind of earlier versions of it, but like the most recent Mad Max, the Logan movie. It's these girls are the key to. There's a girl who's the key to everything. Star Wars, and she's perfect already. She just needs to realize she's perfect. And maybe some male's job might be to get out of the way and let her realize that she's perfect. John DeLynn, I feel like you're not watching movies lately, man. You're not getting the message. You're sort of getting it. You got the perfect girl up there, but you just haven't gotten out of the way enough. Like the guy dies in Wonder Woman. He dies off of a plane. Oh, and he dies in Logan. And the guy dies. Oh no, he didn't die in Mad Max. He just left. He left the community off into the wilderness himself. But you're not watching the movies well enough to win.
Makes sense.
Oh, and it turns out the guy's the bad guy who always seemed to be the nice guy who was helping you in Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
And
he had a white savior complex, poor fellow.
And it turns out the other guy was just a toxic weenie. The bad guy was just a toxic. You can't be Luke Skywalker. Can't be an old oracle like a mentor. No, he's a toxic idiot. And that's all you can be. So get out of the way of the perfect girl who never needed you. She never needed your training.
So
all I'm saying is I'm not fishing for compliments.
I'm
just saying it's complicated to be the right type of ally. And I'm sure I've made a gazillion mistakes trying to be a good ally.
Oh, yeah, you should just disappear like Luke Skywalker. He just disappeared. Like, you know how he does that? Like, I mean, that's really using the Force. Is just disappear yourself.
Yeah, the only good white ally is a dead white ally.
But I mean,
that's why Luke was the ultimate anti-toxic hero, man. He just disappeared himself. He got what the problem was. It's me. Disappear me.
It's been me all along.
It's been me all along. I can just disappear myself into the ether.
Sorry about all that.
I tried to disappear myself off to an island. It wasn't good enough. I needed to disappear myself.
Yeah, a girl found me.
So like just today, like I tried to advocate for somebody and they reached out to me and said the way you advocated for me wasn't helpful. Like, if you don't come at me calling me a rapist and a pedophile, and you just come at me directly, if you're a marginalized group who doesn't feel like I've been a good ally, if you can stop short of calling me a sexual predator or a rapist, and just
if you're a marginalized group, I guess if you're in a marginalized group, it's funny. It's amazing how they get confused in their own language. Are you talking about individuals or classes of people right now?
Yeah, and if you're a class of people, John Lynn, you can't not be a rapist and a pedophile because you are part of you are a class representative.
But yeah, it's amazing. Like, what the hell is that? Like, that just in that sentence there, you can see the cognitive dissonance gears grinding up against each other.
Yep.
Yeah, crazy.
Behind the scenes and say, John, I know you're trying to help. What you're doing isn't totally helping. Here's a few pieces of feedback. I know it's not your job to educate me, but I'm doing my best.
Not my job to educate you. That's such a trope of the past 5
You know what?
years.
It's my privilege to educate you, John. I consider it a privilege. No money, no compliments. I just do it because I care.
So one is not becoming the monster you ran from. So like
yeah, be careful when you stare into the abyss, eh, John?
Yeah.
We've all been betrayed by the church. And so on the one hand, anger is healthy. But when you're in a constantly critical space of shining a spotlight on the church and speaking truth to power, it's really hard not to become the monster you ran from. It's really hard not.
He doesn't have any points to put onto that.
Hey, we did better. We got through quite a bit more of that in only 2.5 hours this time.
Yeah, I wish I could go to the one where he talks to the kid who went on to his mission in Honduras, and they get into more lashing themselves about being white males and the neo-colonialism that they're doing and have been a part of. But that's just the last little additional part that I'd add on that one. But yeah, we made it.
Yeah. We got to find, I don't know, like, because the thing is, we keep saying, like, we got to just stop grinding on John DeLynn. But like you say, like, you keep waiting for him to go.
I'm already behind on
it. Yeah. It's like, well, he keeps saying the stuff he says, and we have
well,
to
that's just easy, but we need to take time to prep other stuff too if we're gonna do
sure,
other
yeah.
stuff, because we could have talked about the BLM one from the Short Fat Otaku. We could have talked about the Nuance Bro one that we mentioned, and then shown the ADL thing and just left
Yeah.
John DeLynn out of all of it, because we can go ahead and start doing stuff like that if we want to get off of how bad and monolithic the politics are of the ex-Mormon blogosphere. But there's going to be some pushing into it. Go check out Jonathan Streeter's most recent video about social injustice. I appear on it. It just dropped, although this is going to come out after that. And we're going to do more on that.
I'm really curious if we want to get into other topics. Something that I know almost nothing about, but I really want to explore is this whole DesNat thing.
Yeah, but then you'll get them coming after you just as bad as like your name Noah might come after you, or if you talk, or like when James Lindsay, he's been having a hell of a time the past couple of days talking about the neo-reactionary movement.
Are they anything like the Mormon ANCAPs?
No, I guess no, they're worse. Like Quakos.
Oh wow, worse
like they'll do stuff
ANCAPs.
that they'll come after you. They'll come and try to like dox you and try to come to your work and try to like,
wow. And like
maybe what we should do is talk to the lobster dudes, because the lobster dudes have had a bunch of run-ins with them.
Yeah, no, because like I went on their group and I just asked, like, because it was a genuine question, like, what's up with DesNat? And everybody thought I was trolling. Just like, no, I'm really asking.
Yeah,
what's up with DesNat?
Quaku
I don't
mentions
know.
DesNat's Quaku's had some run-ins with DesNat. Like DesNat's not fun.
That I just like, because like my first thing was like, oh, that's funny, because like for ages I joked. I had a joke about like that I wanted to bring back Deseret as a nation. You know,
I've
but
got
I
to
was
show you.
being completely silly, but apparently it's a real thing.
I've got to show you this whole branch of YouTube and post-Mormon trollers that Marty showed me. Some people who they did some weird trollish, almost kind of like 4chan trollish stuff, like doing these like call-in shows where they pretended like they were real, and they even got like Brad from the Midnight Mormons to interview with them, and I don't think he realized he was being trolled. But they're also 4chan to the level like they might run around with the DesNat crowd at the same time too, or you kind of can't tell what they are or not.
Yeah.
And she showed me like this whole list of videos from them, and I was like, holy crap. And she wanted me to cut it out of the thing, because she's like, I don't want to cut it out of me, like let's cut this out. And so I cut it out of the thing. But I'll show you the videos.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah, okay, I gotta get running.
Cool.
Okay.